Today we are holding already the 7th International Timerbaev Nuclear Debates, and we have so provocative topic to discuss: the future of the CTBT, the issue of resuming nuclear test, and its interconnectivity with the entire non-proliferation regime. As an executive secretary of the debates, I'm happy to welcome our debaters. Today we have 4 teams, 2 political teams and 2 military teams, represented by young specialists from Austria, Brazil, Russia, the US, or МГИМО-MIIS, Ural Federal University, and ПИР-Центр. So today we also have wonderful mentors who helped our debaters to deal with such a controversial agenda. And finally, I'm happy to present our experts, Dr. Orlov, Dr. Kuchinov, Professor Nopf, and Tariq Rauf, who is planning to join us a little bit later. Warm greetings to all of you, but unfortunately we do not have Ambassador Timerbaev with us today. Anyway, ПИР-Центр, with the help of our colleagues from different organizations and countries, is developing so many initiatives to commemorate him. I don't want to repeat all this information which was provided so many times before, and instead of it, I'm pleased to give the floor to Dr. Orlov for delivering his welcoming remarks for our current participants and his memories on Ambassador Timerbaev, who was his mentor, teacher, colleague, and friend, as well as for all staff members of ПИР-Центр in many decades. Dr. Orlov, please, the floor is yours now.
Yeah, Yelena. Hello, good morning, good evening to everyone. I'm grateful to our mentors, to our senior colleagues who joined us today. I'm grateful to Dr. Kuchinov, Dr. Mikhailenko, Professor Nopf, and hopefully Mr. Rauf will join us soon. It's really very nice to see you today, tonight, and of course, Ambassador Timerbaev's name and passion to non-proliferation keep us together in this very unusual and very challenging times. No, I will not share with you my memories of Roland today, because I think we are here for debates and to listen to our young generation. What I would like to say that, of course, being very passionate, Ambassador Timerbaev also was quite a controversial personality. He had his very strong views on some things which we may share today, or we may challenge today. And definitely Roland was that kind of a personality who was never shy of expressing himself, but also he was never against being challenged. This is why we do not have the Timerbaev readings. We exactly have the debates, because he was a debater, very strong one, and again, never shy to express his position on the CTBT-related issues. Roland's position, not position of our debaters today necessarily, or our mentors. Roland's position was always crystal clear, being, I would say, a product of the post-Cuban Missile Crisis diplomacy. He, of course, was very much in favor of the 1963 partial test ban treaty, and was working hard both as a diplomat but also as academic, being in part-time and Primakos IMIMO on the test ban, comprehensive test ban related issues. published a few articles, a few books throughout the ages, challenging the US doubts about the importance of the comprehensive test ban. And of course, in 1996, Roland was among those most happy about what was going on in Vienna. Being passionate, Roland also was very realistic. Of course, that list of 44, Roland could not ignore and could not pretend that the process of joining by all who are in that list would be smooth. I can guess, although I would not like to speak for Ambassador Timerbaev, I can guess from many conversations with him in the late 90s and throughout early 2000s, that he believed that US administration at some point of time would be wise enough to ratify the CTBT. Roland also was trying to see how CTBT signing ratification could be applied to the Middle East. He strongly believed it was in the interests of both Israel, Egypt, and Iran to ratify the treaty. Although better than many others, he realized why it was not happening. And Roland wrote a lot already within the ПИР-Центр on South Asia, on India and Pakistan, another very difficult case where we not only do not see ratifications, we even do not see signatures to the treaty by neither India nor Pakistan. And of course, today, our participants will be challenged with a very interesting, thought-provoked, but also very practical task. The question we put to them, we put to you, do we really need to resume nuclear tests, and will it really harm nuclear non-proliferation regime? Unusually, for the structure of our debates, we put 4 teams instead of 2 and 2, because sometimes we had a feeling, we still have a feeling, that positions and views of the diplomatic part not necessarily coincides with the military part. I do remember at the ПИР-Центр around 95, very extensive debates between Ambassador Timerbaev and General Maslin, whether CTBT really was needed, and Maslin, being a representative of the defense ministry, was initially against the CTBT, but also as a soldier, he was very disciplined to follow the general decision on that issue. But I remember the debates were strong. They always were accompanied by a bottle of vodka, sometimes with honey and pepper. And a general and diplomat believed at that time that one would win who would have the pepper on the bottom of the bottle, who would first get that pepper from that pepper and honey vodka would win. Today we have slightly different rules. No alcohol promoted, so only soft drinks, but I'm sure the debates will be as heated, and I remember them from the practitioners of quite some years ago. And last but not least, what I would like to share with this group. I know there are students here. Some of you will be graded for these debates. So we all take it seriously. It's a game, it's a simulation, but it's serious stuff. And the fact that it's serious stuff, I realized just yesterday when I spoke to a group of European ambassadors here in Moscow. And when they asked me what PIR plans are, I immediately mentioned today's debates. I said, what the topic? I mentioned the topic. There was a pause in the audience. And there were people like German ambassador, Swedish ambassador, EU ambassador, French minister counselor, and the like, and said, "Wow, good luck to them. Good luck to you. We all will enjoy the debates, enjoy them too." Back to Elena.
Thank you so much, Dr. Orlov. And now I'm happy to turn to Professor Nopf, our good friend and colleague from MIIS. Professor Nopf, unfortunately, could not stay with us for all the debates, so he will leave us and then rejoin again if it is possible for him. And we ask him to deliver some introductory expert comments on the agenda even now. Jeffrey, I'm very happy that you could attend the debates. Many thanks to you, and the floor is yours now.
Great. Thank you very much, Yelena. And I will try to stay logged on and listen to as much of this as I can. I'll probably have to step away a couple times to get some other work done, but my plan is to hear as much of the debates as possible. It's my pleasure to have been invited to welcome and introduce all of you to this latest Timerbaev debate. About 10 years ago now, our friend and colleague, Dr. Orlov, spoke to my colleague at MIIS, Dr. Bill Potter, the founding director of our Center for Nonproliferation Studies, with a proposal to create a dual degree program that would enable students to spend some time studying in Russia at МГИМО and sometimes studying in Monterey at MIIS. At the time they raised the idea, it was believed that there would be a nice tranche of money to support the program that would come through what was then the G8 Global Partnership Program against WMD. Geopolitical developments in the world made that financial source of support no longer possible, but we decided it was a good idea nevertheless and went ahead and launched a dual degree. For obvious reasons, it's become more and more difficult over time to keep this cooperation going. But I'm very pleased and excited that we were still able to enroll a new cohort of students this fall, and it's lovely to see all of you who have had the bravery to undertake this journey and start your first semester this semester, and also wonderful to see students from other universities as well coming to participate in this debate. I never had the pleasure to get to meet Ambassador Timerbaev, unfortunately. I do have colleagues who knew him and speak very, very highly of him. I did have the opportunity to get to know and to work a little bit with Ambassador Timerbaev's American counterpart, George Bunn. George Bunn was the lead U.S. negotiator on the negotiations that created the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And he and Ambassador Timerbaev became good friends and continued to work together for many years after those treaty negotiations were concluded. You know, thinking about Timerbaev and his legacy, it's a good reminder of both how important, but also how difficult the role of the diplomat is. A diplomat has to be able to represent their country's government, perhaps even at times when they may not privately agree with their country's policies, and they have to be able to negotiate in a way that serves the national interest of their country. But at the same time, they have to be able to really speak to and understand the perspective of the people who are sitting on the other side of the table, which can also be a very difficult task to do. And then finally, when we're talking about nuclear weapons, there are, I think, serious questions about whether we have responsibilities that go beyond just a narrow understanding of the national interest? Do we have responsibilities to all of humankind? Do we have responsibilities to keep the planet safe and livable for future generations? And so to juggle all of those tasks, to speak for your government, negotiate on behalf of the national interest, understand the perspective of the other side, keep an eye out for the interests of humanity, that's a very, very challenging task, and that both Ambassador Timerbaev and George Bunn were able to perform those tasks successfully. Sets a very high bar for inspiration for those of us who would be interested in following in their footsteps. Dr. Orlov also reminded me that diplomats can never work alone. International negotiations are always what in the academic field of international relations is called a two-level game. So even if the governments of two or more parties can reach an agreement, often there are domestic political processes that have to be observed. For example, in the United States, bringing treaties to the US Senate for ratification, and a deal that can be agreed to internationally sometimes fails at that second domestic level, which happened, in the United States with the CTBT. So politicians and military leaders matter as well, not just diplomats, and all three of them have to do their jobs in ways that hopefully converge on an agreed path forward that meets these criteria of serving the national interest, recognizing where there are shared mutual interests, and preserving the possibility of life and a future for all the other people on the planet who don't get a seat at the table. So that's a lot to ask for, but I know that all of the students who are participating today will bring knowledge and insight to the debates, and I hope to stay online for as much of it as I can, because I'm very much interested to hear what all of you have to say, and good luck in the debate.
If I may, with the permission of Yelena, and particularly taking into account that Professor Nopf may leave at some point, I just wanted to emphasize to flag one thing. Yes, there are some people here in this virtual room who are part, not all of you, but some of you, are part of our dual degree program in non-proliferation studies. And for some, it may be, who are not part of this group, it may be helpful just to remind that this program, yes, thank you, Jeff, this program exists, this program continues running, and this cohort will graduate in spring 2025. We have, Jeff, an excellent cohort. Again, we are in the middle of the educational process, so I don't want to sound sweet now, but I do have strong reasons to say that we have an excellent cohort. It's small, very committed. Because it's small, it has to be very hardworking, because almost every week we have seminars, and for a small group it means everyone has to work hard and cannot hide. But nobody wants to hide. So that commitment is impressive, and I'm sure that when this group moves non-virtually to Monterey already pretty soon, you also will enjoy both the education process but also personal collaborations. So that's important. I'm very glad we managed to keep this program. Before, we used to say that this program was unique for this reason, for that reason. Now we may say just it's unique, full stop. And that's it. Okay. Thank you, Jeff, for your cooperation, and warm regards to all the friends in Monterey.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Nopf, for your contribution. and later we will have a special session when the experts will be delivering their expert comments, and we hope that Professor Nopf could rejoin us again if he needs to leave us now. So it's time for me to convey moderation rights to Ksenia Mineyeva, our timekeeper today. I would like to point out that Ksenia, for her side, previously was a debater within the 6 debates which was concerned with the AUKUS deal and its influence on nuclear non-proliferation regime. So Ksenia knows how it can be both exciting and difficult to debate on such an ambiguous issue. Ksenia, I'm pleased to give the floor to you to moderate our debates procedures.
Thank you, Elena, for the introduction. It's great to see everyone. As Elena said, I participated in the 6th International Timerbaev nuclear debates, so I'm especially happy to be here today as timekeeper. And based on my own experience, I would like to point out that the debates are an excellent opportunity to dive deeper into the controversial problems of non-proliferation regime, to improve your critical thinking and argumentation skills, to understand better the many technical, political, and normative questions raised today. So, as already mentioned, today's topic of the debate is: do we really need to resume nuclear tests? And will it really harm nuclear non-proliferation regime? It is obvious that this topic needs to be discussed, taking into account the variety of factors and reasons. That's why this time we formed 4 teams and asked them to analyze the wide range of the political, military, technical, geopolitical, and other aspects of the agenda. And now I want to introduce our first team, who will be arguing as negative military team. So excuse me if I make mistakes in your names. So the first team is Linus Heller. He is a student of the International Dual Degree Master's Program, Global Security and Nuclear Policy WMD Non-Proliferation, developed jointly by ПИР-Центр, МГИМО University and MIIS, and Grace Paulina Smith, who is also the student of the International Dual Degree Global Security and Nuclear Policy WMD Non-Proliferation. And their mentor is Anatoly Shokin, consultant of Education and Training Program at ПИР-Центр. So our second team, who will defend affirmative political position, is Spencer Arievets, who is the student of the International Dual Degree MA Program Global Security and Nuclear Policy and WMD Non-Proliferation, and Jessica Eleonora Martin, who is also the student of the Dual Degree MA Program. They mentored by Sarah Erickson, graduate of the International Dual Degree MA Program and research assistant at UNIDIR. Also, we have the third team, who will be arguing as negative political team. This team includes Pavel Andrushchenko, who is a student of Global and Regional Security and Conflict Management MA program at Ural Federal University, and Valeria Tumakova, who is PhD student at Ural Federal University. And their mentor is Dr. Ekaterina Mikhalenko, Associate Professor at Ural Federal University. Finally, our fourth affirmative military team includes Vilnur Khairdinov, who is personal assistant to Deputy Director of Education Training Program at ПИР-Центр, and Veronika Terpkova, intern of the Education and Training Program at ПИР-Центр. And their mentor is Alexandra Zubenko, who is also the student of the 7th cohort of International Dual Degree MA Program. So now a few words on how our debates will be conducted today. First, we will hear 4 5-minute speeches from our political teams. After that, I will invite the military teams to join the debates, and we will also hear their 4 5-minute statements. This will be followed by 25 minutes cross-examination session between all the 8 debaters. Invited experts also can pose their questions to debaters. The debates will be concluded by 2 minutes final speeches of all the 4 teams of debaters. During your speeches, I will send a warning to the chat that you have 1 minute left to speak. And after the end of time, I will have to interrupt you, of course, in polite form. So if we don't have any question, we will start with affirmative political team. Dear debaters, you have 5 minutes for announcement of your arguments. So please take the floor.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues, faculty, alums, ПИР-Центр members, and honored guests, I'm here to advocate affirmatively for the resumption of limited nuclear testing from a political standpoint, a matter of significance in the ever-evolving global landscape. At the core of the argument lies the transformative potential of new safety measures, emerging technologies, and in the indispensable role of supervised underground limited testing, maintaining a credible nuclear deterrent. In our pursuit of progress, technological advancements fortify the safety measures of existing nuclear weapons, substantially reducing the risk of accidents. By integrating sophisticated safety mechanisms, we can minimize the likelihood of unintended detonations or malfunctions, thus creating a robust shield against potential disasters, especially given the aging of the nuclear warheads. Yet the true efficacy of the safety and security enhancements can only be unequivocally validated through limited nuclear testing. Testing allows us to meticulously simulate real-world scenarios, critically evaluate the performance of new technologies under extreme conditions, and ensures that proposed measures function precisely as intended. Without such rigorous testing, uncertainties loom large, compromising the overall safety and security of nuclear arsenal and of political standing in the issue. There is also the need to retain a core of experienced weapon designers whose accumulated knowledge is indispensable in maintaining confidence in the safety of our nuclear stockpile. Without the incentives provided by continued testing, leading designers will be tempted to move away from the nuclear weapon laboratories to other careers, a trend that might prove irreversible, putting the legacy knowledge of the safety of our devices at risk. As geopolitical landscapes evolve, nuclear weapon states confront new and diverse threats that necessitate tailor-made nuclear capabilities. Limited testing emerges as an indispensable tool in developing and refining the safety of the next generation warheads in the ever-evolving tapestry of security concerns. Moreover, limited nuclear testing plays a pivotal role in the broader context of nuclear deterrence and non-proliferation efforts, which my colleague Spencer will address in detail. The ability to conduct limited tests signifies a steadfast commitment to maintaining a formidable deterrent, effectively discouraging rivals from pursuing, or non-nuclear weapon states from pursuing aggressive nuclear postures, and consequently contributing to global instability. Nuclear testing is presented as a critical element in reinforcing the extended deterrence umbrella, assuring allies that the current nuclear weapons are reliable and effective and safe, most of all. This in turn promotes non-proliferation objectives. And of course, we need to address environmental concerns. They're not merely a periphery consideration, but an imperative aspect of our advocacy. It's crucial to emphasize that limited physical testing explicitly refers to underground testing. When conducted at sufficient depth, these tests effectively contain their environmental effects, preventing the release of gases or contaminants into the surrounding environment. Rigorous supervision and adherence to safety protocols are imperative to ensure that these tests are conducted safely, with utmost care to mitigate potential risks into the environment and our society. In conclusion, the imperative for a balanced approach resonates loudly, one that considers the essential need to maintain a credible nuclear deterrence, the unwavering commitment to advancing responsible nuclear stewardship, the crucial role of validating safety and security enhancements through limited supervised underground testing. The future of global security and stability hinges on collective ability to adapt, innovate, and responsibly test technologies that underpin nuclear capabilities. Thank you.
Jessica, thank you so much. And now I would like to give the floor to political negative team. Valeria or Pavel, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the privilege of presenting to you today our case against resumption of nuclear tests. First and foremost, we would like to remind you that back in 1995, the NPT Treaty was extended indefinitely as a part of a package deal, which included the conclusion of a CTBT as one of its key elements. It is also considered as one of the 13 particular steps outlined in the final document of the 2000 Review Conference of the NPT. Therefore, we contend that the resumption of nuclear testing by nuclear weapon states today would constitute a significant setback to the credibility of the non-proliferation regime as a whole, not to mention the arms race it might spark. It would not only be a breach of commitments, but also a direct challenge to the fundamental principles underpinning the NPT. Such a move would certainly prompt non-nuclear weapon states to reconsider their commitments to the treaty and, consequently, their non-nuclear status. Additionally, it would provide carte blanche to states that has not yet ratified CTBT and are not members of the NPT. Second of all, the resumption of nuclear testing might have negative repercussions on nations' international image and domestic policy. Governments would face challenges in justifying the resumption of nuclear testing to both international and domestic audiences. Public opinion will strongly oppose such actions. Concerns about environmental hazards, health risks, and the perceived violation of the international agreements could lead to protests, advocacy campaigns, and increased scrutiny of government actions. Nations resuming nuclear testing risk facing diplomatic isolation as other countries, especially those committed to disarmament and non-proliferation, may condemn such actions. Allies, particularly those with strong anti-nuclear sentiment, may reconsider their alliances or partnerships. Violating the global norm against nuclear testing could tarnish a nation's reputation as a responsible actor, global actor. This might impact their credibility in advocating for nuclear non-proliferation, disarmament, and participation in international forums. International organizations and alliances, NGOs, will express their disapproval, leading to strained diplomatic relations. This move could precipitate a crisis of confidence among member states, undermining the trust and cooperative spirit that was built over the years. Moreover, with advancement of scientific research and computer simulation capabilities, there are alternative methods to ensure the safety and reliability of existing nuclear arsenals without the need for actual nuclear testing. By investing in those cutting-edge technologies and robust verification mechanisms, we can help maintain a credible deterrence capability without putting lives and the environment at risk. Therefore, computer simulations grounded in the latest scientific understandings allow us to comprehensively assess the behavior of nuclear weapons under various conditions, ensuring their reliability in the moment of need. And not to mention that nations have already made the substantial investment totaling tens of billions of dollars in the development of infrastructure necessary for conducting non-nuclear tests and simulations. Once these state-of-the-art facilities are operational, the ongoing costs for running those experiments are comparatively low. This established framework underscores the financial wisdom of prioritizing non-nuclear tests and simulations over costly and outdated option of nuclear testing, reaffirming that such a strategic move would align with our economic sensibility. And to put it simply, resuming nuclear tests would be a fatal mistake that will not only jeopardize the international non-proliferation regime, but also undermine the credibility of a nation without any reasonable justification. Thank you so much.
Pavel, for your arguments. And now we are going back to political affirmative team. So Spencer, the floor is yours.
And as my partner Jess had indicated, I'd like to discuss a few points why a resumption of physical testing would actually not harm the NPT regime or in any way lead to its fracturing. And the most important part of this analysis is that to date, disarmament progress has been stalled for over a decade, but the NPT regime still stands strong. Only one state party has left, the DPRK, since its creation in 1970. And since then, its universality has only continued to grow despite the lack of continued disarmament progress by the nuclear weapon states. So there's no reason to believe that a resumption in physical testing would in any way contribute to a demise of the NPT regime when seemingly its most important pillar, disarmament, in the eyes of many of its state parties, has completely faltered, but yet those non-nuclear weapon state parties continue to remain parties to the treaty and push for its continued adherence. And proof of this is evident in the collapse of the ABM treaty, the INF treaty, similar supportive treaties in the realm of confidence and security measures like the Open Skies Treaty or the CFE Treaty. All of these have fallen apart the last decade and a half or 2 decades. And despite these failures, the NPT still stands. And so there's no reason to believe that merely the resumption of testing for a treaty that has not even entered into force would lead to sudden collapse at the NPT that these other clear failures have not already created. Additionally, the CTBT is not international law. It's questionable whether it's even international customary law, but it's certainly not even international legal norm or legal law, as it has never entered into force. There are still 8 annexed parties that have yet to sign or additionally ratify the treaty, and there's no indication that that'll happen at any time soon. So there's no clear reason to believe that the CTBT will have any legal authority in the near future. Moreover, there's nothing preventing a legal signatory, not a ratifying state party, from testing, as legal signatories are not legally bound by the intents and purposes of the treaty, even if it hasn't entered into force yet. Additionally, as it relates to Article 5 of the NPT, since the conclusion of the CTBT, Article 5 has continuously been reinterpreted to be in full compliance with the intents and purposes of the treaty pending its entry into force. But it's very important to recognize that these are purely political agreements. They're not legally binding agreements. Every decision taken in 1995, as it relates to the principles and objectives for disarmament and non-proliferation, the 13 practical steps of the 2000 final document and the 64-point action plan are all political undertakings, many of which, by the way, of those respective undertakings still remain unfulfilled. But we fail to talk about these lack of progress, but only seem to focus on the need to uphold the test ban moratoria pending the CTBT's entry into force. So it's a bit hypocritical for the negative side to claim that that a resumption of testing would negatively impact the NPT regime more than, let's say, a failure to establish a Middle East WMD free zone would to date. Additionally, there's more hypocrisy. It's well known that in order to have a functioning nuclear program, one must have both a nuclear device and a delivery vehicle. There's no international cry for a delivery vehicle ban treaty, no missile test ban treaty. In the opposite has occurred. Missile testing is perfectly normalized in the international system, and there's even agreements between the United States and the Soviet Union, the United States and Russia now, to ensure that missile tests do not cause an escalation in tensions through the Ballistic Missile Notification Agreement, which still remains in force. And so if there really should be this great push to ban essentially the continued vertical proliferation of nuclear weapon states programs, it seems hypocritical to only approach it from the physical nuclear testing side and not from the delivery vehicle side. Lastly, as the opposing team noted, all the nuclear weapon states maintain a high level of test site readiness, which they've made very clear since the open for the conclusion of negotiations and open for signing of the CTBT. And this is just a clear point to prove that the nuclear weapon states were never serious about the original intents and purposes of the CTBT, which was to halt vertical proliferation and eventually lead to disarmament as stockpiles reached maturity and retirement naturally. And so if it's readily apparent to continue simulated testing or to maintain test site readiness, why should it not be okay to resume physical testing? Thank you.
And now, negative political team, please.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I stand before you to argue against the resumption of nuclear testing. So nuclear testing poses significant risks to the environmental, human health and global security, and it's crucial to oppose any renewed nuclear testing for several reasons. Firstly, let's cover environmental impact and human health concerns. As we all know, nuclear testing releases harmful radioactive materials into the atmosphere and underground. This radiation can have long-lasting effects on ecosystems, contaminating land, water, and air. It poses a threat to biodiversity and can lead to serious health issues for both humans and wildlife. Nuclear tests simply cannot be safe. Even underground tests can cause radioactive contamination of terrestrial and marine ecosystems and occasionally result in local or widespread contamination through the accidental leakage or radionuclides into the air from the surrounding rock. For example, this occurred in the case of the Bay Area underground test when a large cloud of radioactive dust was released into the atmosphere. It's relevant to highlight the impacts on indigenous people too. Nuclear testing has had significant and lasting impacts on indigenous people around the world. We will remember the horror of nuclear testing in Polynesia, Kazakhstan, and Algeria. These impacts include health effects, displacement and loss of land, environmental degradation, and cultural impacts. Nuclear testing often requires evacuation and displacement of indigenous communities from their lands. And as a result, indigenous people have faced the loss of their cultural heritage, traditional livelihood, and connection to their land. And as for global security implications and armed towards to maintain global security, it's essential to promote diplomacy and cooperative measures rather than resorting to nuclear testing. Resuming tests can contribute to an arms race where other countries may feel compelled to develop and test their own nuclear weapons in response. And this competitive dynamic can escalate tension and increase the risk of nuclear conflict in general. And the danger is even if all three states, let's say the United States, Russia, and China, start by only planning to go second, one of them might talk themselves into the importance of going first. One of them might decide that since everybody else is doing it, it's better to get the jump and really get going. And it's crystal clear that all three countries, once again, Russia, China, and the United States, have invested a great deal of time, effort, and money in not only modernizing their nuclear arsenals, but also in preparing the types of activities that would be required for a test. And the threat from nuclear testing is from the degree to which it accelerates the growing arms race between the United States on the one hand and Russia and China on the other. And the consequences of that are that we are spending vast sums of money and time while we are not an inch closer to safety. Thus, the question of whether we really need to resume nuclear tests is a complex one. We must carefully weigh the potential benefits against the risk and consider the broad implication of nuclear non-proliferation. By focusing on diplomatic solutions and strengthening the existing framework, we can strive for a world free of the threat posed by nuclear weapons. And in the conclusion, it's crucial to grasp the idea that we are on the verge of this kind of science fiction future where we're reborn all of these terrible ideas from the Cold War. Thank you.
Valeria, thank you. Thanks to the arguments of our political teams, we can see how complicated the discussed problem is. So I would like to invite to the debates our military teams. And the first team is military affirmative team. Vilnur and Veronica, the floor is yours.
With Russia having revoked its ratification of the CTBT, the issue of nuclear testing has become as relevant as it was at the end of the 20th century when the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty was designed. The CTBT is justly considered a milestone as regards installing nuclear stability and ensuring global peace and security. Aimed at preventing further horrendous damage caused by nuclear test explosions and stressing the need for a continuous reduction of nuclear weapons worldwide with the ultimate goal of their elimination, it keeps falling a prey to international upheavals. As military servicemen, we cannot turn a blind eye to the pending issue of nuclear testing. If the system of global security goes loose, we have to be sure that our country can guarantee the safety of its citizens, knows its strategic pitfalls, and can tackle potential challenges. By and large, the reasons why we should stand for resuming nuclear tests are numerous. To be more precise and succinct on the topic, we'll go as far as to name just a few prerequisites. First of all, resuming nuclear tests would enable us to develop more powerful and efficient nuclear weapons. In other words, testing would allow military technicians to study the effects of different types of nuclear explosions and design ever more effective weapons. No matter how powerful modern supercomputers are, they cannot perfectly simulate nuclear blasts. Secondly, testing allows to ensure the reliability of existing weapons. Nuclear weapons are complex and require precise engineering to function properly. The great demand for testing comes from the desire to be able to investigate the effects of flaws that may be found in a stockpiled weapon. Examples of such flaws are corrosion, warping of metallic and non-metallic elements, and the opening of assembly joints. Testing ensures that stockpiled weapons are reliable and can be used if needed. Thirdly, testing would spur nuclear arms race, which would greatly benefit military structures in economic terms and create new job opportunities, namely for military technicians, engineers, physicists, and others, which will also help to combat unemployment. Most importantly, as regards job opportunities, is the intertwining of the governmental and private sectors. Last but not least, it is a way to maintain a credible deterrent. What I'm saying is that a country's nuclear arsenal is only effective if it is seen as a credible deterrent. Testing can help maintain this credibility by demonstrating the country's nuclear capabilities and ensuring that it can deliver a retaliatory strike. Thank you.
Thank you, Veronica. And now, negative military team, please.
Dear organizers, honorable delegates, esteemed experts, we have heard much from the other teams about the supposed advantages of resuming testing. Some of these arguments unquestionably were presented rather convincingly, but it just remains a simple fact that nuclear testing would not be militarily sensible. Simply put, the current state of affairs is, from a technical standpoint, more than sufficient. As we've heard, aside from the DPRK, no nuclear power or nuclear armed state has conducted a supercritical test in the 21st century. This is not a mere sign of goodwill or the lack of interest in the topic. After all, relations between many of the great powers are at a new low, and billions are invested in nuclear arsenals every year. Nor is it because there is some sort of comprehensive test ban treaty that is unanimously accepted. Instead, these countries, with very, very geopolitical consideration, varying treaty obligations, and very different military doctrines, independently figured out that it is military best practice not to resume testing. Nuclear arsenals today are no less safe or effective than they were in the 1990s when testing stopped. Indeed, advances have been made since then on all fronts, ranging from lifetime extension programs to weapons design to delivery vehicles. Nuclear forces aren't weaker for a lack of testing. Computer modeling, for instance, aided by the incredible and exponential advances in digital technology, has replaced testing, so much so that it is even considered a proliferation risk of its own. Combined with subcritical tests and other research, which very much does continue in the absence of big, costly, and damaging nuclear explosions, this is a significant improvement over previous approaches to weapons development and allows more thoughtful, more fine-grained, detailed, and scientific progress on our nuclear arsenals. Our nuclear arsenals have matured, and so have our techniques. From a military point of view, it is simply not necessary to test. Nor is it desirable. The costs are just simply incredibly high. Even for countries with large resources having to maintain and restore test sites, to hire, pay, and house thousands of scientists, technicians, and staff, maintain an extensive surveillance program, and ensure secrecy, etc., is a burden. With no need for testing, it would be silly to allocate this amount of funding to a militarily irrelevant cause. Instead, it could be employed by politicians elsewhere, or if allocated to the military, we would be better served by investing it in areas that do, in fact, further our technological development and enhance our national security. After all, from the military point of view, it is evident that testing is not necessary and would draw resources, funding, and scientists from areas that do need attention. Speaking of costs, aside from the financial and ecological impacts, which we've heard about also from the political team of our conviction, testing poses our security risks. Isotopes released into the atmosphere can travel long distances and be sampled by our adversaries. The US, for instance, maintains a fleet of aircraft, the WC-135s, for that exact purpose. This can provide the enemy insight into our technology we would not want them to have, and crucially, which they would not receive and will not receive if we do not test. Similarly, seismic waves can be used to estimate the yield and other parameters of nuclear explosions. Additionally, the large number of people involved in setting up and conducting a supercritical test on their own pose a problem, no matter how tight security, as anyone who has watched Oppenheimer the movie will be able to tell you. Considering the lack of real utility in testing, this underscores how unwise of a military position it would be to resume tests. The status quo, including international norms, treaties, and conventions in the military realm, has served us well. None of the nuclear powers is falling behind at present. In fact, many are actively overhauling or even expanding their arsenals, including the PRC, US, and Russia, with ambitious modernization programs, and that in absence of supercritical testing. Resuming testing, in addition to the aforementioned arguments, would then open the door to others doing the same and potentially radically upsetting the status quo that is currently serving us well. This is clearly militarily unwise. In aggregate, it is evident that continuing to refrain from testing is the indisputably soundest military option. I thank you for your keen attention and organization, and yield the remaining time back to the organizers. Thank you.
Linus, thank you. And now I would like to hand over the floor to the affirmative military team.
Yes, thank you. The 2022 Nuclear Posture Review identified the modernization of the US nuclear arsenal as a top priority in maintaining a strong nuclear deterrence. That modernization effort, which is being carried out over the next two decades, includes initiatives to modernize all three legs of the nuclear triad. In October 2023, the Biden administration announced the intention to add new nuclear gravity bombs, dubbed B-61, to the US arsenal. There is clearly still a lack of technical information on the real-life explosion, their ramifications. Scientists working in this secretive compound at south of Paris are still several years away from being able to replicate nuclear fusion or trying out a new bomb design without detonating it. Their American counterparts are only slightly closer, despite billions of dollars spent on supercalculators and superlasers. New nuclear arms race creates new jobs and allows governments to inject money into the economy. For instance, in 2022, defense spending worldwide increased by nearly 4% in real terms to over $2 trillion, and no country that wants to be capable of protecting itself is to lag behind in that aspect. In addition to that, the arms race can be profitable not only for governments, but also for multinational corporations. It is pointed out that over a period of 3 months, after the US administration announced its withdrawal from the INF Treaty, Raytheon received an anomalous 44 separate missiles contracts worth more than $500 million. A recent report from PAX, a Dutch peace organization, identifies a total of $116 billion in current contracts between government and the private sector to design, build, and maintain the world's nuclear arsenals. The 5 largest known current beneficiaries of nuclear weapons spending are all US-based multinationals: Huntington Ingalls Industries, Lockheed Martin, Honeywell International, General Dynamics, and Jacobs Engineering. The report also identifies large nuclear contracts with companies elsewhere. Airbus, headquartered in the Netherlands, develops nuclear-armed missiles for France. As regards nuclear deterrence, the US, Russia, and China, 3 parent members of the United Nations Security Council, which have not ratified the CTBT, and North Korea, are said to have increased activity at nuclear test sites. According to CNN, the US, Russia, and China have all built new facilities and dug new tunnels at their nuclear test sites in recent years. USA has, in fact, been open that it has added nearly 1,000 square feet of underground laboratory space for conducting subcritical nuclear experiments at its nuclear test complex at U1A, Nevada. Meanwhile, expansion are also evident at Lopnur Chinese test site and at Novaya Zemlya, the Russian test site. Also, North Korea demolished tunnels and facilities at the Pageant-3 nuclear site in 2018. Satellite images since 2021 show that the test tunnel and support building have been reopened. Meanwhile, the decision would not pressure. The decision would put pressure on our opponents, which could force them to actively participate in arms control talks. The US and China held arms control talk before the Xi and Biden meeting in San Francisco in October. However, there's no tangible results. Regarding the issue of proliferation, the USSR created its nuclear weapon because there was a threat from the United States, Pakistan, and India because the countries are in straitened relations with each other. Israel, because it is in the midst of its enemies. The DPRK, because there was a threat from the United States. No one state has created nuclear weapons because another country has tested them. They have all created nuclear weapons to be sure that their defense potential allows them to protect the state. We consider these cases sufficient to consider that one of these countries will soon conduct another test of atomic weapon in the 21st century. Given such a high probability, the confident movement of the world in the direction of a global war that could escalate into a nuclear war, we must be 100% confident in our armed force, in our warheads, in our security and ability to defend our sovereignty. Thank you for your attention.
Vilnur, thank you. And now the floor is for military negative team. Grace, please.
The claim that a return to nuclear testing is imperative for the maintenance of our arsenal and the development of new weapons does not hold up when weighed against the advancements made in alternative testing methods and the costs associated with the resumption of testing. Firstly, a 2007 JASON report that's been verified multiple times over estimated that plutonium pits, the primary explosive devices of nuclear weapons, are expected to last 85 years without significant performance degradation. But more importantly, there are robust computer and science-based simulations and non-nuclear tests of electronics and high explosives, technologies that allow for modeling of nuclear tests. Supercritical tests or hydronuclear tests are to determine whether or not warheads are 1-point safe, but there's no significant advantage from testing at these levels. The labs are confident in the 1-point safety of the arsenals, and the focus instead is on subcritical nuclear tests to verify that the plutonium metal behaves when imploded. Advanced simulation and computing programs develop simulation capabilities using supercomputers to analyze and predict the performance, safety, and reliability of nuclear weapons and to certify their functionality. Scientists also collaborate in these programs with universities in state-of-the-art computational physics. Lifetime extension programs allow modernization through refurbishment without additional nuclear testing to respond to environmental damage concerns, add effective safeguards and security features, and enable warheads to adapt to multiple delivery vehicles. The engineers in these programs say the physics-based understanding of nuclear detonations has improved significantly over the past decade without physical nuclear testing, thanks to the theoretical advances, experiments, and simulations, together with the existing nuclear test database. Full, three-dimensional, high-fidelity simulations allow physicists to observe important nuclear-related phenomena nanosecond by nanosecond, with a level of spatial resolution previously unobtainable. Validation for advanced simulations is provided by sophisticated non-nuclear experiments like hydrodynamic experiments and high energy density experiments that confirm these simulated findings. Together, these technologies are even solving problems that existed unsolved when we were still able to physically test and measure, like the mysterious energy loss during nuclear explosions and the strange nature of plutonium. And aside from not being necessary, the costs associated with resuming nuclear testing are substantial. Restarting testing would require significant investments in recruiting, training, and retaining personnel with specialized knowledge in nuclear testing, as many experienced scientists and technicians from the era of nuclear testing have retired or passed away. Investments in the equipment and facilities for the tests will be required because much of the infrastructure for testing was last used in the early 90s and will need to be upgraded and modernized. The CTBTO estimates the cost of a single nuclear test to be in the range of hundreds of millions of dollars, and a fully instrumented test to address a complex stockpile problem would take 24 to 36 months to develop, and tests required for the development of a new nuclear capability might take up to 60 months. That is 5 years. High costs may be prohibitive, and they may lead to states opting to conduct cheaper tests, which could cause atmospheric or hydro pollution and thereby environmental or health damage and loss. And the environmental consequences of nuclear testing are very well documented. Radioactive fallout and contamination of air, soil, and water have long-lasting effects on ecosystems and human health when radioactive products from testing vent either into the atmosphere or leak into the hydrological system. The disappearance over time of experts all around the world in containment of underground testing is significant, meaning there's a very real risk of containment failure and environmental devastation. And in conclusion, the evidence presented that demonstrates that alternative testing methods have proven effective, both in maintaining the reliability of our arsenal and advancing our understanding of nuclear physics, demonstrating our ability to ensure the safety and effectiveness of our nuclear deterrent without resorting to the risks and expenses associated with renewed testing, which far outweigh any perceived benefits. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you for your remarks. And now we move on to the next stage of our debates. It's the 25 minutes cross-examination between debaters. Each team has an opportunity to ask questions in other teams. The experts can participate in this session as well. So just let me know if you want to ask the question. Raise your virtual hands in Zoom, and please also specify which team you ask the question, or maybe your question is addressed to all teams. So please go ahead. Yes, Jessica, please.
Hi, thank you. I'd like to ask a question based on Valeria's speech. Thank you for your speech. Very interesting. You mentioned the risks, the environmental risks, especially to the indigenous peoples. I guess my question is, do you support nuclear energy? Because nuclear energy also has risks with waste and so on, and also a lot of the lands in which uranium is located is in the indigenous lands, specifically in Canada. So I just think that there is a parallel between the environmental risks with nuclear energy as well as nuclear testing, and also nuclear testing specifically when we're advocating for is conducting it in a safe manner, which is not atmospheric testing, is only underground, and is meeting certain requirements so that we would not be contaminating the environment. But of course, there are risks in the same fashion that there are risks with nuclear energy, but there are also benefits as well.
Okay, thank you. Valeria, please.
Thank you so much for the question. First of all, I have to mention that I'm convinced that there are no safe nuclear testing at all. And
Valeria, excuse me, but you have some problems with web connection. Can you repeat, please? Valeria, do you hear us? Okay, maybe Valeria, do you hear us?
Yes, sure.
Can you repeat, please, because you have some problems with your connection. So
sure. So first of all, thank you for the question. And I think it's crucial to mention that I'm convinced that there are no safe nuclear tests at all. And personally, my country had a horrible experience in their past with nuclear tests. And yes, I can support nuclear energy in general, but not in the case of nuclear tests in the military term. And I think it's not appropriate position to stand by during this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you for your answer. Pavel, please.
Yes, thank you so much. We haven't shown a question for the affirmative political team. As you mentioned before, that underground nuclear tests can be safe. Yet, our question to you is: do we have a data what happens to the nuclear materials that are released into the ground in the long run, in the run of 100 years, 200 years? Because basically, from that point of view, I would argue that. My question is, what would happen to those materials that are released into the ground over a long period of time? Thank you.
Thank you, Pavel. Affirmative political team, Spencer, Jessica, please.
Should I take it, Spencer, or would you like to?
If you'd like. Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Pavel. Thank you for the question. I guess it's the similar arguments with nuclear energy. What happens with the deposits that are underground? There are risks as well, and they remain there for, beyond our generations and the generations of our grandchildren. So what I'm advocating for is safe, regulated underground tests that have been demonstrated to limit any risks of contamination. So of course there are risks, the same manner in which there are risks associated with nuclear energy. And I don't think that's the reason why we basically moved away from nuclear energy, just because there are specific risks and we don't necessarily have a way of addressing the waste, if there is any. Therefore, I'm not sure. I believe that's a valid argument.
Thank you, Jessica. Spencer, do you want to add something?
Yes, I'll just add something very quickly, that underground nuclear tests are conducted far enough underground that, at least among developed nuclear weapon states, that it removes any risk in practice of radiation exposure seeping up to the surface, and that the explosion detonates far enough underground that any residual radiation from the blast is contained within the core of the Earth, beneath the Earth, far enough that it will not have any serious remedial environmental impacts on the surrounding area.
Thank you for your response. And I saw that Grace raised the hand. Do you have a question?
I do have a question. Yes, thank you. I wanted to address my question to the affirmative political team, and I wanted to thank you for your presentation. That's so well presented, your stance. And I wanted to just challenge you on one point. I believe Spencer mentioned that because the CTBT was never ratified and did not come into force, it doesn't represent an international norm. And I wanted to know what your response is to the fact that aside from the DPRK, no country has tested, and it is the stated political stance of both the US and Russia that they are upholding the norms of the CTBT, even though they have not ratified it, or in Russia's case, have recently de-ratified it. And thank you for your attention. I'll yield the floor to you.
The affirmative political team, go ahead, please.
Thank you so much. As far as I understood the question was about
Excuse me?
CTBT. I'm sorry?
Affirmative
as far
political.
as yeah. Do you hear me?
Affirmative political. Grace, the question was from affirmative political team, yes?
It's true. The question was for Spencer and Jess. I apologize for any misunderstanding.
Okay, Spencer and Jessica, please.
Yes, I can answer that. Well, setting aside the fact that, as you noted, the CTBT is not an international legal norm in any way, nor is it international law. It's never entered into force, and it's not close to entering into force. It's apparent that, yes, you noted that the DPRK, at least in the 21st century, is the only country that has conducted a physical test. It's also, I think, worth noting to recognize that India and Pakistan, both on the twilight of the CTBT negotiation, decided to conduct a series of nuclear tests before announcing their own political moratoria in line with P5's political moratoria at the time, pending the entry into force of the CTBT. And so I think it's important to analyze the utility of a political moratoria and applying it in light of purely political commitment. It would be one thing, for example, if India and Pakistan were to announce a political moratorium not test without conducting any tests, but it sort of defeats the purpose of a political moratorium not to test immediately for conducting a series of tests, which is the same exact thing that the United States and Russia did as well prior to declaring their moratorium on testing. And so the very essence of political agreements are as such that they hold very little value when push comes to shove, and that as the circumstances around change in the world, that political moratoria and political agreements are just as subject to change and futility.
Okay, Spencer, thank you. And Jessica, would you like to add something?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Would you like to add something to?
No, I think
okay.
I think Spencer said it clearly. Yeah, thank you.
Okay,
I agree
thank
with
you very much. And Veronica.
I have a question to the formative political team. Well, in your speech, you've mentioned that countries that conduct nuclear tests might face international isolation. And in this regard, I would like to take the examples of India and Pakistan that conducted their tests after the CTBT was designed and opened for signature. However, no international isolation followed. Of course, there were sanctions imposed on India, but they were weakened and lifted within a very short period of time. And in 2008, it even was granted a waiver from the nuclear suppliers group, even though there were some reservations concerning its position on the non-proliferation. So do you think that this is, well, indeed a valid point that international isolation or complete international isolation might follow after the testing?
Thank you for your question. Affirmative political team, please.
No, I do not believe that resuming testing impacts the stance in the global fields, and it does not mean it won't become a responsible actor. First off, we're advocating for, like I said,
excuse me.
Go ahead.
I think there must have been some kind of. Excuse me. Yeah, I think there must have been some kind of a misunderstanding. It was the question was for Pavel and Valeria.
Thank you.
Yeah, for the piece of Pavel. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yes. Just thank you so much for your question. Well, we would believe first to your example that India and Pakistan have tested even after the CTBT. Well, in our case, at that period of time, major nuclear powers stopped testing only in around 1992. If you take, for example, the United States, and at that period of time, it wasn't that punishable because the geopolitical situation was very different. Besides that, I believe that diplomatic relations would stain and sanction might be imposed, but not by the whole international community, but it would definitely have the effects from many of the states that are pursuing nuclear non-disarmament goals, and especially the states that have suffered before from those nuclear tests. Thank you.
Thank you, Pavel. And I would like to return to affirmative political team. I saw that you would like to answer this question, and maybe you would like to continue your answers, Jessica and Spencer.
No, we have nothing to add. We're in agreement with Veronica's position.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you so much. And Linus?
I will go away from the affirmative political and ask the affirmative military team a question. This is to the point of jobs creation, that an arms race could spur jobs creation and economic growth, which, aside from that seeming more like a political point, this seems to me somewhat backward looking. My understanding, and please do correct me if I'm wrong, is that physicists, scientists, and thinkers now work with computers in places like Arlington, Virginia, rather than with pickaxes in New Mexico. My impression would be that it would be more beneficial to have scientists push the frontiers of nuclear science rather than focus on backward-looking techniques. Would you mind perhaps expanding a little bit on what you meant by that?
Is this question only for affirmative military team? Yes?
Anyone who would like to take it is free to take it. I posted to them because I believe that they brought this point up.
Okay, we will start with affirmative military team. Please go ahead.
Well, personally, I believe that this point is pretty much clear because, well, whenever you need to produce something, you need people who would create the technologies and who would create or who would produce these very things. And while if you need technicians, if you need engineers to probably advance your technologies, and if you need physicists, they do not necessarily have to work only you've mentioned that they have to work on computers, and as I got it, probably you'll have to correct me if I got it wrong. So they do not have to work only with supercomputers. They have to create technologies which might be used then on the battlefield. So, why wouldn't they work for the military of defense or for the Department of Defense? I think that arms race does indeed create new job opportunities in any case.
Veronica, thank you. Yes, Pavel, please.
We would like to expand on the question that was asked before, but to the probably affirmative military team. But what would happen to the scientists already working on this stockpile storage program? Would they lose their job in order to move to nuclear testing in this case? Thank you.
Yes, okay, thank you. Affirmative political team. Yes.
Well, I think this will be more a case of
military
question because I lost my internet connection.
So I guess the question was basically if the current scientists would lose their jobs because who are working on nuclear weapons because they need to be doing testing. Did I paraphrase it correctly, Pavel? Okay. And was it to the military team?
Yes, maybe affirmative military team would like to add something.
Yes, I think this is more a situation of combined or joint efforts. So nobody will lose their workplaces. Nobody will lose their jobs.
Okay, thank you so much, Grace. Grace, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yes. And this is just a counter argument for the military team. In creating jobs with an arms race, I would assume, and you can correct me if this is the wrong stance, but I would assume that the point of job creation would be to bolster the economy or to add money to the economy somehow. And I wonder how you would respond to the sheer costs of an arms race. In the past, the sheer costs of arms races have devastated the countries that partook in them, scraping resources from the population and pouring them into the military in a sphere that was never actually used. And now the costs stand to be much higher because we don't even have an economy of scale anymore. We don't have the infrastructure we need to resume testing. We don't have the scientists who are trained to resume testing safely. Everything would basically have to be started over from scratch, and the investment would be enormous. And I hold that it may be more than the economy could make just by creating new jobs to support the creation of that infrastructure.
Great, thank you. Military negative team. Do you would like to answer something?
Was it for the negative or for the affirmative team?
I would think it's for the affirmative team since we are the negative team.
Grace, please, can you repeat for...
This would be for the affirmative military team.
Military team, yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Affirmative military team.
Okay, we have already mentioned that in 2022, defense spending worldwide increased by nearly 4%. And while countries will probably go on increasing their defense spending. And well, why would we withdraw from this arms race? Well, why would we as a country withdraw from this arms race and somehow jeopardize our security? What is more important than security and the safety of our citizens, even though it costs a lot and, well, we have to bolster our economy. Well, there is nothing else we can do at this point. We could do this. There is nothing else we could do at this point.
Thank you.
Could I also add from
excuse me, Spencer. Do you would like to add to this question?
Yes, from the political point, if that's okay.
Okay, please.
Yeah, very briefly. I think setting aside the very real positive economic benefits of expanding a state's defense industrial capacity, particularly as it relates to the nuclear industry. I think that given the world that we live in today, that to fail to do so would actually be negligent of the supreme interests and security interests of the state, and would put citizens at risk of falling behind in an increasingly destabilized and conflict-ridden world. So there's actually a political imperative to resume testing to ensure that a state's technical and industrial capacity is on par with the competitors around it.
Okay, thank you. Valeria, please.
Thank you. I guess it's a question for both affirmative teams. So could you tell me, please, even if we resume testing, whether we can develop truly effective program to support nuclear test veterans, even remotely all military rehabilitation programs didn't work?
Valeria, thank you for your question. Political affirmative political team. The floor is yours, please.
Just to clarify, the question was
any clarification
whether or not a resumption of testing will even be effective to rehabilitate nuclear arsenals?
Valeria.
Could you tell me, please, whether we can develop truly effective programs to support nuclear test veterans, if not even remotely all military rehabilitation program works?
Okay. Well, I think that, firstly, I think that this is an unfortunate legacy of the war and an unfortunate legacy of atmospheric testing. But no one here is advocating for resumption of atmospheric testing. And since the partial test ban treaty was entered into force, that among the superpowers, at least, there's been only underground testing, which has not resulted in any nuclear test veterans in the traditional sense of the Cold War. So going forward, a resumption of testing would not indicate any need, would not indicate any renewed victims of testing in that sense. But on your point of the existing veterans, that it's a concern that all of the nuclear states, particularly in Russia, take seriously and have programs to address and remediate for. But setting aside that fact, I don't think that those terms are pertinent necessarily to the point of this discussion as it pertains to future testing, not necessarily the legacy of victims from the atmospheric testing age.
Spencer, thank you. And affirmative military team.
Well, we completely agree with the affirmative team.
Okay, thank you. Valeria, do you have a question in this regard? Yes, no?
Thank you.
Okay, Grace, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Yes, I have a question for all teams, and if our experts would like to weigh in on this as well, regarding the domino effect. Hans Blix, the former Director General of the IAEA, has since his term there been extremely outspoken about his worries about the domino effect in the NPT regime. Basically, all the decision-making psychology of our deterrent is based on reactionary policy and appropriate reactions to what other states do. And this is underpinned by the fact that first use and first strike are almost universally accepted as bad military policy. So the first one to resume testing is undoubtedly going to have an immediate ripple effect throughout the entire international community to react, to reevaluate, and to protect. And I'm wondering what all of you think about whether or not this is a step in the wrong direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. We have only 2 minutes. So if team would like to answer, please raise your hand. Virtual Vilnur, please. Do you would like to answer this question, or do you have your own question?
Both.
Firstly, please only answer the question.
Yes. I want to remark that, as I already mentioned, nuclear testing is not related to domino effect, because the nuclear states created their nuclear program and nuclear weapons not because others did it, but because they were in the dangerous situation. And it includes conventional and non-conventional dangers. Thank you.
Thank you. Jessica, I saw that you would like to.
Sure. I think 2 points. One is, I believe there is a greater risk if there is no ability to test from a deterrence and assurance of our allies under the nuclear umbrella. For instance, in South Korea, 70% of the population right now supports creating a nuclear weapons program. And if nuclear weapon states cannot assure them against states like DPRK, then I think we are at a greater risk because they cannot rely on the existing arsenal. And also, the nuclear weapon states, they have very aged arsenals that need to be evaluated. There are certain limitations on nuclear testing that can be done through computer monitors. And let's say through computer monitors that fails, it basically removes all the deterrence in the nuclear arsenal because you don't have the ability to actually physically test and know that your technology is still valuable. And also, declaratory policy from Russia was that it will not resume testing unless the United States resumes testing. So I don't believe that once testing is allowed, it will basically be all states, okay, it's now once and for all, let's all begin testing immediately and without any respect for any safety or laws. I think there will be still diplomatic negotiations and coordination to make sure it's done safely and correctly.
Jessica, thank you. And Pavel, do you would like to answer?
Yes, right. Yes. First of all, we would like to align also with this case and say that nuclear testing will definitely cause the domino effect. And for example, if we look right now at the Russian position and position of Russian Federation, our position is currently that we are not going to do it firstly. We are not going to do it first. But if the United States are going to do it, we will have to follow the suit. And in this certain position, I would say that China would have to follow the suit. And in case if Russia tests first, the United States will most certainly have to follow the suit and test their nuclear weapons. It is simply inevitable in order to be able to be effective in deterrence. Thank you.
Thank you, Pavel, for your position. And I saw that the Spencer's hand was the first. So please.
Thank you, Ksenia. I actually think that if there is a domino effect, it'll actually be a net positive, because given the decades that have gone by since the T5 instituted their unilateral political moratorium on testing, arsenals have continued to age, and there's actually a very real positive chance the resumption in testing among the P5 will assuage any concerns amongst the military leadership of those countries about the reliability of their arsenals. This actually this will coalesce domestic political will for further reductions of the overall numerical size of their stockpiles, which will actually contribute to the fulfillment of disarmament obligations in Article 6. So in some way, resumption of testing can actually lead to further disarmament progress.
Could you repeat for what team this question?
This was on behalf of affirmative political. This was in response to Grace's question.
Okay, thank you. Vilnor.
Yes, thank you. The question is for the negative military team, but both negative teams can answer. It is not really a military question, it's more debatable, but I would like to hear the answer. To begin with, a small remark. Grace reasons that the nature would be contaminated, but underground tests are quite safe for nature. Let's say Grace were right. As you think that it's more important for the state. Pollution of a small area of nature, which will be later purified, or inability of the state to resign its territory and potential nuclear strike on even greater areas and more pollution, not to mention all victims.
I can answer this.
Thank you, Vilnor. Yes, Linus, please answer.
Yeah, so I'll happily answer this on behalf of negative military team. It's been a long day. I think I fully agree, of course, with you that the top priority of a state should be its defense, and therefore I don't believe that there is any need to resume nuclear testing, especially not in any super critical, super explosive way, be that underground or above ground, and the associated risks. We simply have better techniques today that allow much more frequent tests, much better adjustment of small parameters than explosive tests. And therefore, I think this question is simply a hypothetical exercise, since there is no need to resume nuclear testing. We don't have to worry about whether there is contamination or how widespread the contamination is, or whether it will seep into groundwater or not after 200 years. So that is simply the way that things are nowadays, thanks to our technological advances.
Okay, thank you. And negative political team, do you have any comments or remarks?
We could only align with the negative military team and add that not all states have the privilege of developing its own nuclear weapons and even answering back. And in that particular case, I would like to say that it would be better to not test at all and to not proliferate even further. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pavel. And Valeria?
No, nothing good.
Okay, thank you. Vilnor, do you have other question?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Linus, please.
This question will be addressed at the affirmative military team, but happy to have anyone else answer as well if anyone wants to contribute. There was a point made that the US has added substantial space underground for additional subcritical, with an emphasis on that word, tests. To me, this seems to show clearly that policymakers and military thinkers believe that the priority should lie on such subcritical testing, and that they see the future in it. If you wouldn't mind, I'd appreciate if you could provide some further insights into why you believe that this is a sign that we should receive actual explosive nuclear testing on a larger scale, supercritical testing, against apparently the advice of scientists, policymakers, and also against public support, which in most polled countries is about 80% against nuclear testing.
Thank you for your question. And affirmative military team.
First of all, I would go as far as to say that while media resources report that, the three permanent UN Security Council members, US, Russia, and China, have increased activity at their nuclear sites, and while they did not put this open. They did not declare that. However, well, the only fact that got approved and which the US was open about is that it has added nearly, yes, as you have rightly put it, 1,000 square feet of underground laboratory space for conducting subcritical nuclear experiments. But I believe that this is the issue of transparency. So if the country is ready to somehow let the other countries in the world know that they are now ready to conduct subcritical nuclear experiments, we have to be aware of that, and we have to take that into account that something more serious might follow. So why would we lag behind and not develop our own sites as well?
Thank you, Veronica. And other teams, if you would like to answer this question, please raise your hand. Okay, maybe do we have any questions from teams? Yes, Spencer, please.
Yes, thanks. I just have one question for the negative military team. They admitted that simulation testing has gotten so advanced that it actually poses a proliferation threat in and of itself. And so I'm just curious why it's seemingly okay to continue simulation testing if it's such a proliferation threat, but it's not okay to resume physical testing, which in many ways is easier to detect and prevent than simulation testing because of the actual seismic and radiological signatures of the actual methods.
I can respond to this.
Yes, Grace, please.
Thank you, Spencer, for your question. From our view, the reason that any type of conventional weapon could be a proliferation threat is because of its ability to impact strategic stability by possibly taking out some type of nuclear infrastructure. However, conventional weapons in themselves don't have the Armageddon-like quality that nuclear weapons have to the planet for collateral damage for other countries, for the entire globe in the case of a nuclear fallout. And therefore, this type of disruption to strategic stability might be considered welcome. If you imagine the disruption to strategic stability that concrete steps toward disarmament are going to provide, then maybe it's possible that there is a type of disruption to strategic stability that's welcome. And I don't know, Linus, if you have anything to add or not, but that's my initial thought in response to Spencer's question. Thank you.
I'll add one
Grace,
more.
excuse me, Linus.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, continue, please.
Yes, I'll add just one quick thing. I think Spencer raises a valid point, but I don't think this is a new point specifically to the proliferation risk as it comes from computer modeling. I think this is a much older concern in the world of proliferation. And also counter-proliferation or non-proliferation of the spreading of intellectual property. In order to build weapons, it is significantly helpful to have weapons designs, not to have to develop them domestically or to have, the layout for centrifuges, for cascades, things like that. Outside knowledge that you can get through advisors, that you can get through the CAN network if you have those connections, and so on and so on. So I think this is a valid point. I believe, as I said in my speech, it is a proliferation concern, but I do not believe that this nullifies the advantage of the non-explosive testing of computer modeling, etc., over supercritical tests.
Thank you, Linus. Do you have any other questions, maybe from our experts to our teams, to our debaters? I thought that we don't have any questions, so we are going to final speeches. Let me recall you that you have only 2 minutes for each team. Both debaters can take the floor, but you have only 2 minutes. We will start with affirmative political team. Please, your final speech.
Yes, I can go first. Okay, so let me just make sure I don't take time from my colleague. Okay, so in conclusion, thank you everyone for your contributions. I think they were valid and interesting discussion. I have not been changed in my position. I still believe there are ways to conduct nuclear tests safely underground, and that's the most efficient way for us to ensure that we continue having a deterrence from nuclear weapons, assurance of allies, and preventing non-proliferation from that standpoint. And I'll pass the word now to my colleague, Spencer.
Thank you, Jessica. Spencer?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Jessica. Senio. Just touching on the ramifications, or rather lack thereof, for the global non-proliferation regime. It's clear that the non-proliferation regime is ridden with double standards and hypocrisy, none of which has undermined it to date. And so, in essence, there's no reason to believe that a resumption of physical testing would create anything different. The opposing side has cited countless political arguments at previous review conferences of the NPT, many of which remain unfulfilled, either in their entirety or partially, and that has not led to a collapse of the non-proliferation regime. There are countries that reside outside the non-proliferation regime with nuclear weapons, and that has not sparked a wave of proliferation or a new domino theory of aspirants that have managed to get away with it. And so there doesn't seem to be any there to the notion that a resumption in underground physical testing would lead to anything other than a resumption in underground physical testing. Thank you.
Thank you, Spencer. And negative political team, the floor is yours for final remarks.
Thank you. Thank you so much for everyone. We must recognize that nuclear weapons do not bring security or stability. Instead, they fuel tension, provoke conflicts, and increase the risk of catastrophic accidents or international use. So the pursuit of disarmament and the prohibition of nuclear testing are essential steps towards a safer and more peaceful world. And it's imperative that we come together as a global community to advocate for the complete abolition of nuclear weapons and the termination of nuclear testing. So let us work towards a future where the threat of nuclear weapons is eliminated and where peace, security, and sustainable development can flourish. Thank you.
Thank you, Valeria. Pavel, do you would like to add something?
Well, if you have time, then we would like to once again note that no underground testing are safe. And for example, if we remember the case that happened in the United States in 1917, when the incident when the underground test led to a big fatal mistake and error, and tons of radioactive elements were released into the atmosphere. And in that sense, we would like to note that no underground safe can be 100% safe. There will be mistakes made by human, mistakes made by computers. No calculations are bulletproof. Thank you.
Thank you. And affirmative military team. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I will speak on behalf of the two of us, on behalf of military resourcemen at large. Let's take into account the fact that this question, to test or not to test, in addition to the fact that it is still being debated, is now more relevant than ever. When there is such a high probability that other countries will test nuclear weapons, which will lead to increased defense capabilities, and the relationship between increased defense capabilities and unleashing an attack has not been cancelled. When we are on the potential brink of a global war, we need to be confident in our defense capabilities. To conclude, despite all the advancements and achievements on the technological part, we must admit that the physical nuclear tests remain absolutely indispensable to this day. Thank you.
Thank you. You have 1 minute. Maybe Veronica would like to add something.
Well, as we have already mentioned, this issue is absolutely at the forefront of diplomatic and military attention. And unfortunately, we have to support the idea that nuclear tests are indispensable, and they have to remain physical, because no supercomputers or supercalculators can provide all the necessary data, and people still have to be involved, and military servicemen have to ensure that the country can tackle whatever challenges it has to face with due dignity and with due retaliatory measures. So we as military servicemen stick to this position.
Thank you so much for your final remarks. And negative military team, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Respected experts, delegates, organizers, our standpoint remains unchanged, and with good reason. It is backed simply by scientific facts, by the leading military thinkers, and most importantly, by sound military effectiveness. There is simply no military need, but many downsides to the resumption of nuclear testing. Tests, therefore, must remain a matter of the past. The combination of costs, risk, diminishing returns, existing and exciting future high-tech developments, damage to the non-proliferation regime, and too many other factors to list in 2 minutes makes it clear that there is no level-headed reason for resuming supercritical testing except for erroneous judgment. Any resumption would leave us in an invariably worse military position than if we simply maintained the advantageous status quo. Doing this, furthermore, is easier than ever thanks to those technological advances that are much more scientifically sound than explosive tests, not to mention significantly easier to conduct and security conscious. Military policy should not be driven from political sensitivities or from feelings of fear, and we are confident that the audience of esteemed experts present here today sees these observations as what they are, empirical facts. Only this can make for correct and sound military decision-making. Thank you, and I yield my time to Grace.
Thank you, Grace.
You muted, Grace.
Yes. Your microphone. Yes.
Thank you. Sorry. Yes, I just would like to conclude with this question. How do militarily powerful nations respond to fear and to crises? With matching fear and anxiety? With reactionary, escalatory, inflammatory policy based on short-term thinking? No, it's with strategic vision. We stand with the negative political team and the globe to not resume testing, and thereby to not take a step forward to arms racing, defrauding our economies and world war. Let us uphold the non-proliferation regime that has cost us so much to build and strengthen it with clear-headed focus on the scientific progress that will take us to peace. Thank you kindly for your positions and your attention.
Thank you, Grace, for your arguments, and dear debaters, thank you very much for this discussion. Unfortunately, our time is up, and congratulations to all teams. It was a pleasure listening to your arguments, your positions, and now I would like to hand over the floor to Elena. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tanya, for your moderation, and many thanks to our debaters for their arguments and comments. I think that it was rather fruitful discussions. So you see in the agenda that we do not have any voting procedures to define winners and losers, the best teams, and etc., because each debater did a great job. We do believe in it. Now let's turn to our expert comments to dive into more in the topic of the resumption of nuclear testing, the future of CTBT, and etc. This time we put expert remarks in the third part of the event, just due to the topic of the debates. And it is a pleasure for me to introduce to you all our first expert today, Dr. Vladimir Petrovich Kuchinov, who is a member of ПИР-Центр Advisory Board. Vladimir Petrovich is an associate professor of the Department of International Relations at the Institute of International Relations at National Research Nuclear University, MIFI. Vladimir Petrovich, many thanks for your participations. I'm happy to turn to you.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you, first of all, you personally and ПИР-Центр inviting me for this debate, and thanks all participants for their, I should say, excellent presentations, and especially this cross questions timing or event when you are, let's say, putting the questions to each other. And certainly this was very interesting to hear. It was very interesting. All this argument you provided to defend your position. And what I would like to say, first I would like to say that you make a wonderful job due to the fact that the question which was put to you was not only provocative, as Vladimir said initially, but also ambiguous. Because what does we mean? Because certainly we defines very significantly your arguments and your position. If you would like, for example, if you would ask, for example, some representative from the non-nuclear state member of NPT, you definitely will hear the arguments against all testing, resuming the testing, without any doubts. And the arguments will be from political, from, let's say, environment, from whatever angle. And it will be so solid that you will be, I am sure you will be convinced. But another way, if you ask the member, let's say, or representative from nuclear weapon state, but you see that there is also difference what kind of representative it will be. Either it's from military side or from, let's say, political side or from economical side, you will also find the very different answers, as you just demonstrated, because there is argument pro resuming testing from military side, there is arguments for resuming testing from political side, and quite vice versa. There is some, let's say, arguments which is against of your resuming of tests. So this is just showing the complexity of this problem which you addressed to. And the second ambiguous, what kind of test? Nuclear test. What kind of test? Whether it is the underground test, whether it is atmospheric or underwater or space, this is a difference. Because as I believe you, everybody, you know that today there is nobody who will, let's say, will advocate the resuming, let's say, atmospheric or underground or underwater or space test. So the treaty of Moscow Treaty 1963, it's a solid nuclear international legal instrument which is undiscussable. So it means that all discussion, and it is also, most of you addressed the underground test. And certainly there was a lot of issue about the safety of underground test, about other things. But what I was surprised really, and what personally I can never accept this argument and comparing the peaceful nuclear energy and nuclear power with the nuclear weapons and testing. It's completely different issues, let's say. And they're just speculating on the risk of nuclear power and the risk of release of some radioactivity from nuclear underground test is speculation. It's not correct. So what I'm really just was surprised to just hearing such kind of arguments. But unfortunately, this is also arguments which can be, let's say, used to advocate the testing. So, and then just what I would like to say again, that you just did remarkable let's say, job. And presenting the arguments, you have really shown that complexity of the matter, the complexity of the discussions and complexity of the position, not between, let's say, different societies, different states, non-nuclear, nuclear, but inside the nuclear state. Because, as I understood, you're all representing either Russia or United States. So this is just nuclear weapon states, which is just somehow, let's say, now raise this issue about the resuming the underground test. So this is what I would like to say. And then I would like to add one more, let's say, issue for your thinking. It's about the so-called peaceful nuclear explosion. Because in accordance with the CTBT, factually, the peaceful nuclear explosion also prohibited. And cannot be, let's say, neither used or tested or whatever. But please think about the asteroid danger. And only instrument, at least from the, let's say, some expert evaluation, which might save the Earth as a planet from this danger of collision with, let's say, asteroid, is nuclear explosion on the asteroid. It should be understandable in asteroid. But to keep this technology, certainly some experiments, I don't know whether the limited test might be quite sufficient for this, to keep this technology reliable, would be enough. I'm not expert on how to keep this technology, but I'm just adding to your consideration one more issue which should be also taken into account. So thank you very much, all of you, for your wonderful presentation on wonderful arguments pro and contra, and these discussions. And I would like to repeat, I'm really enjoyed this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Vladimir Petrovich. I'm sure that many of our debaters may want to ask some questions and to address them to you, but I can...
No problem.
Yes, I can suggest just holding all the expert, just to listen to all our experts invited, and then we will have a special Q&A session. Okay, so now my pleasure again to turn to Professor Джеффри Нопф. Jeffrey, please.
Great, thank you very much. Well, let me begin by seconding what Dr. Kuchinov said. I thought the debate teams did a very good job. I could tell that all of you really did your homework. And I know from talking to some of you who are current students that you have a very busy schedule. So finding time to really immerse yourself in the details of the nuclear testing issue, it really showed in the preparation and the comments that everybody made. As I was listening to the debate, I think you raised many of exactly the same issues that would come up in the real debates that are probably happening in the corridors of power in Moscow and Washington. And I think many of the political and strategic issues you raised, probably almost verbatim what the actual political and military advisors are saying. I also heard some very creative and novel arguments that I think probably go beyond what might be likely to come up in the two national capitals, where, to be honest, debates tend to be pretty routinized and stick pretty close to what people always argue about. I was also impressed to see you guys move a bit beyond the core political and military arguments and to talk about, possible economic implications or environmental implications, or what this might mean for indigenous peoples. I suspect that most of that would just never come up in the actual debates in Washington and Moscow, but I think it's to your credit that you took a broader lens than many policymakers would take. I think I might just say some things that are kind of personal for a few minutes, and then I'm happy to take questions as well. I've been interested in the topic of nuclear testing for a long time. When I was an undergraduate student many years ago, a previous millennium, I wrote an undergraduate honors thesis about the early years of political protest and activism against nuclear weapons, and in the 1950s and early 1960s, almost all of that took the form of social protest movements against nuclear testing. Right, this was the era when you had a couple of very significant developments. The technology advanced from the initial fission-based atomic weapons to fusion-based hydrogen bombs. And in order to see if these would work or not, of course, they had to be tested. The tests were initially all above ground. So this was the time period when you had very extensive campaigns of nuclear testing that released significant amounts of radioactive material that became radioactive fallout that would drift downwind and come back to Earth. And it became apparent pretty early on that there were health risks associated with this. And so the fact that even in the absence of the much bigger disaster of a nuclear war, that just from testing, that individual people all around the world could be exposed to increased cancer risks and other potential harms, generated a lot of public protest. And this was really the first time that world public opinion rose up and spoke out against dangers associated with nuclear weapons. And this public pressure was an important part of what led to the treaty in 1963, the Moscow Treaty, or partial or limited test ban treaty, which was a three member treaty, initially United States, United Kingdom, and Soviet Union, which outlawed atmospheric nuclear testing. One other thing that happened in this time period is that, of course, scientists and engineers associated with the nuclear programs in the various nuclear-armed countries realized that the clock was ticking on atmospheric testing, and if they wanted to find a vehicle to continue nuclear testing, they had to find a safer option. So that's when underground nuclear testing was invented, and testing moved increasingly underground. There was an attempt in the negotiations in the late 1950s, early 1960s to negotiate a comprehensive test ban treaty that would also outlaw underground testing. The United States and the Soviet Union could not find common ground on what a verification system for such a treaty would look like, and ultimately decided to put that issue off in order to conclude the limited treaty and at least end atmospheric testing. So from the early 1960s, the goal of achieving a true comprehensive test ban treaty remained on the agenda, and it was a subject of great interest for arms control and nonproliferation advocates throughout that period. It took a very long time to get to the CTBT. There was some renewed momentum in the early to mid 1980s, particularly when Mikhail Gorbachev came to power and became the leader of the Soviet Union. He faced a task in which he needed to try to persuade Western leaders, many of whom were Cold War hawks, especially President Ronald Reagan in the United States, that he was different from previous Soviet leaders, and that he was genuinely interested in changing the relationship and negotiating significant limits on nuclear weapons. But in Western capitals, there was a lot of suspicion, not much trust. And so Gorbachev calculated that he needed to take some very dramatic, visible gestures that would sort of break through the existing mindsets of Western leaders and convince them that he was seriously interested in reform and could be a legitimate partner for arms control negotiations. So one of the steps that Gorbachev took was to declare a unilateral moratorium on nuclear testing by the Soviet Union. He never succeeded in persuading Ronald Reagan to reciprocate that gesture, but it did contribute positively to the overall impression that General Secretary Gorbachev made, and did help persuade Ronald Reagan and other Western leaders like Margaret Thatcher that he was for real, that you could really negotiate with him. And that unilateral testing moratorium did help pave the way for the arms control breakthroughs that happened later in the decade, starting with the INF Treaty. The CTBT, however, still remained on the agenda, and I heard some of you bring this up in the debate. It became very intimately linked with the future of the Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty, right? When the NPT entered into force in 1970, it entered into force for an initial period of 25 years. So in 1995, the review conference that was held had a very important task: what's going to happen to the future of this treaty? And for non-nuclear weapon states, having a treaty that had a fixed timeline and that could end at some point in time was a valuable source of negotiating leverage for them, right? The NPT is a grand bargain in which the nuclear weapon states make certain promises, through like Article 4, where they promise to provide access to peaceful uses of nuclear energy, Article 6, which promises good faith efforts to move towards disarmament. And I'm going to just open a parenthesis here. I'm very pleased to see my old friend Tarek Ralph joining us. I look forward to hearing from you in a minute, Tarek. So as you moved into 1995, many of the non-nuclear weapon states had a clear preference to renew the NPT because they valued the treaty, but for a fixed time period so that they would still have leverage to try to extract concessions from the nuclear weapon states and hold their feet to the fire. But the nuclear weapon states and some of the very strongly pro-nonproliferation, non-nuclear states had a preference to extend the treaty indefinitely and make it permanent. And they were able to win the day, right? The 1995 Review Conference adopted indefinite extension, which effectively means there's no expiration date now on the NPT. It's now a permanent treaty. But the non-nuclear weapon states agreed to that as part of a package deal in which a promise to finally finish the negotiations on the CTBT were part of that deal. And that happened in the UN the following year in 1996. And the US president at the time, Bill Clinton, when the negotiations were finished, referred to it as the, longest sought, hardest fought for, treaty in the sort of nuclear history. So when we evaluate the CTBT and when we evaluate the question of whether or not to resume nuclear testing, right, we can think about these in two different ways, and they both matter, right? So we can look at them substantively. What does the CTBT do that limits or doesn't limit, the nuclear programs of various countries? What would a resumption of testing do substantively to how we feel about the safety and security of existing nuclear weapons or the ability to develop new types of nuclear weapons? But these actions are also symbolic, right? They're a symbol of something. And what they symbolize, I think, also really matters, right? Because we have this history around the CTBT that it emerged from protests of people all around the world, including in many developing countries, because there's a feeling that the limited test ban treaty left business unfinished, and people continue to campaign for the CTBT because the CTBT was a signal of, because nuclear testing moratoriums were a signal of desire to show restraint and have better relationships, because the CTBT was a signal of fidelity to Article 6 and a commitment to keep the NPT going. Whatever are the substantive arguments for the benefits or lack of benefits of resuming nuclear testing, anything that caused the CTBT to come into question or to collapse, it would be a symbol, right? And it would be a symbol that was, to my opinion, very, very negative about the commitment of the world to continue to work cooperatively to limit and to reduce nuclear dangers and to stay away from resuming the kind of nuclear arms racing activities that happened during the Cold War. And I think if we can be honest with each other for a minute here, if any country is going to resume nuclear testing in the near future, and I think the answer is probably no, that they won't. But the most likely candidate that we're talking about right now is Russia. And if the Russian Federation conducts a nuclear test, again, I think it's going to be symbolic, right? They're not going to do it because of concerns about the safety of existing weapons or to develop a new weapon. It's going to be a bargaining tactic, a bargaining signal vis-a-vis NATO and the United States about the course of the war in Ukraine and Russia's commitment to its position in how that conflict is going to be fought. But it would symbolize more than I think just a bargaining tactic in the context of a specific conflict, right? It would also be a symbolic signal of a continued erosion of the global nuclear order and a stepping away from a commitment to reduce nuclear dangers that had been a point of agreement amongst all of the nuclear weapon states, right? We saw that not too long ago, they affirmed what had been called the Reagan-Gorbachev statement that a nuclear war cannot be won and must not be fought. But if countries and their leaders really mean that, they have to back it up with other actions that are consistent with the principles in the Reagan-Gorbachev statement, right? If you really think that a nuclear war cannot be won and should never be fought, then it makes no sense in my mind to resume nuclear testing. It's a concrete movement that symbolically sends a message that we're moving away from a commitment to that shared recognition of nuclear dangers. So I'll stop there. I can stay on the call for probably about another 30 minutes or so. So I'm happy to take questions after Tarek Rauf talks.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey. Thank you so much for your comments and for your contribution. I just would like to remind to all our participants that Professor Джеффри Нопф is a program chair on non-proliferation and terrorism studies at the Middlebury Institute of International Studies at Monterey. So I see that Rick Roof joined us. I'm very happy to greet him. Dr. Rauf is a member of PIR-Center Advisory Board, and previously he worked for several years at the International Atomic Energy Agency, where he held different positions. And for example, he was a head of verification and security policy coordination at the office reporting to Director General. Rick, many thanks for accepting our invitation and for taking the time to attend the debates. I'm pleased to give the floor to you. It's always so nice to listen to your comments.
Thank you very much, Elena, and thank you for inviting me to join this discussion for the second time. We also did it last year, I think. So I'm very pleased to see Jeff Nopf, an old colleague from Monterey, and also Vladimir Kuchinov, along with everyone else. As Jeff was mentioning about the indefinite extension of the NPT, at one point in his career in Monterey, he was also the editor of the Non-Proliferation Review. And if you go to that review, you will find several articles by me on the NPT, and in particular on the indefinite extension and the important points that Jeff was making about, in a sense, I wouldn't call them conditions, but the platform on the basis of which NPT was extended indefinitely. And one of these was the very concrete commitment that the CTBT should be achieved by 1996, and in fact, it was. However, unfortunately, within weeks of the NPT Review and Extension Conference extending the NPT indefinitely, France and China resumed nuclear testing. And in the Non-Proliferation Review, you will find an article by me called French Nuclear Testing, a Fool's Errand. So given the international pressure on France and China, they both succumbed and they stopped testing after doing about six tests each. And they said that this was the last number of tests that they needed to do. Apparently, they needed to do more, but the international pressure, and I think the pressure from the three other the depositories of the NPT, Russia, UK, and the US, on France and China was also quite substantial, that we have just extended the NPT, and we need to keep the credibility of the treaty going. So these two countries then stopped nuclear testing, and eventually we did have the CTBT. Now, I don't know whether this has come up in the discussion, but I thought I would mention why countries conduct nuclear explosive detonations. So first of all, it is to demonstrate a capability that we indeed have the technology and the capability to manufacture and detonate a nuclear explosive device. The second is to test new designs and new concepts of nuclear explosive devices. The third is to provide confidence in the existing nuclear warheads based on existing designs. Another reason is to periodically test nuclear weapons, take one or two off the line, and explode them to see whether they still work according to design or whether there is some deterioration. Currently, the United States is in the process of remanufacturing plutonium pits, about 80 to 90 pits per year. This is quite controversial, and many think tanks in the US, such as the Arms Control Association and others, have been quite critical of this. Another reason for testing is to test the effects of nuclear blast and radiation on military equipment and electrical equipment. This is usually done in horizontal tunnels. Another reason is to maintain the skills of existing nuclear weapon scientists and to provide jobs for the new generation of PhDs and nuclear engineers coming out. Now, unfortunately, that option is no longer available to them since there is no nuclear testing now for nearly 30 years. And finally was the so-called peaceful nuclear explosions to carry out nuclear explosive tests for digging canals, making tunnels, and then so on. Fortunately, those also stopped in the late 1970s. Now, while we did get a CTBT, unfortunately, the entry into force formula is such that we are still at a position today where out of the 44 countries that are named in the CTBT whose ratification is required, until last month, we had 8 countries whose ratification was required, and now with Russia's de-ratification, it is 9. Yesterday, the Executive Secretary, Robert Floyd of the CTBTO, was speaking at the European Union's Non-Proliferation and Disarmament Consortium's annual conference, which is ongoing yesterday and today. And he made an important point that although he's concerned about Russia's de-ratification, he is not concerned that Russia, A, will resume nuclear testing. He made the point that the Russian Federation, which is responsible for 30 of the international monitoring system stations, there are 331 in all, of which 30 are in the Russian Federation, and only one remains to be completed. And he was hopeful that this last remaining 30th monitoring station would be completed and certified by the CTBTO before the end of 2024. He also mentioned that he has been assured by Moscow that the de-ratification does not mean that Russia is not committed to the CTBT, but that in the view of Russia, it puts them back in the same position as China and the United States, which have not ratified. And recall that unfortunately in October 1999, the United States Senate rejected ratification, and no US president since then has had the courage to bring the treaty back before the US Senate for ratification, because over time, support in the US Senate for nuclear arms control treaties is evaporating. And now I think Jeff probably might agree that it is probably impossible to bring a treaty before the US Senate and get the required 67 votes for US ratification. One good thing is that at the CTBT's Science and Technology Forum held here in June, the head of the US National Nuclear Security Administration, Jill Harubi, said that the United States was open to having transparency measures on so-called subcritical tests, which are not prohibited under the CTBT. Supercritical tests or hydronuclear tests are prohibited, where one actually brings a very small quantity of nuclear material to fission and you stop it before it gets a big yield. The U.S. claims that it is able to stop such a initial fission reaction at the yield of 0.5 kilogram. I've seen some literature that at the Russian test site in Novaya Zemlya, they have a containment chamber called a kolba, K-O-L-B-A, which can contain such an explosion of up to 50 kilograms. And you've seen recent reports that activities have been are discernible at the Novaya Zemlya, at the Nevada test site, and at the Lop North test site of potentially preparations for testing. So the U.S. position is that they are not preparing for testing, but they are drilling tunnels for these subcritical tests and also for conducting chemical explosions to calibrate the United States' own seismic monitoring capabilities and also that of the CTBTO. And what Rob Floyd said yesterday in Brussels was that in 1996, the detection capability of the international monitoring system was supposed to detect an explosion down to 2 kilotons. And he said now, with the new technologies, the CTBTO can detect an explosion down to 0.5 kiloton. That's 500 tons of TNT. So the U.S. also claims that they have seen the transportation of these so-called kolba containers to Novaya Zemlya, which, as I mentioned, can contain an explosion of up to 50 kilograms. And the concern, although it cannot be verified, is that potentially Russia may have conducted supercritical experiments which were contained in these kolba containers and would not be detected by the CTBTO's monitoring stations. I haven't seen denials from the Russian side, but I'm glad that the proposals made by the U.S. National Security Advisor in June at the Arms Control Association's annual conference, that after this pause from February 2022, where the United States was not willing to talk to Russia on nuclear arms control, that they now are willing to talk to both Russia and China unconditionally on discussing certain aspects of arms control. And the latest press release that I saw from the foreign ministry in Moscow was that the Russian Federation is now considering this proposal. And Elena would remember that at the meeting she and the ПИР-Центр organized in Bishkek recently, Deputy Foreign Minister Ryabkov was there, and I asked him this specific question. And at that time, he replied that as long as it is the policy of the United States to have the strategic defeat of Russia in Ukraine, Russia would not be in a position to engage on nuclear arms control. So it seems that perhaps there might be some flexibility coming up in that position, because we need adversaries to talk about arms control. The New START Treaty only has about 2 years or so left in its life, and there have been no negotiations. The strategic stability talks that started after the meetings between the Russian and the American presidents in June 2021 in Geneva have also been suspended. I'm glad to hear that the U.S. and China had an initial discussion on arms control. So my final comments with regard to the CTBT, to echo the Executive Secretary's comments yesterday, is not to be over-concerned and not to over-dramatize Russia's de-ratification of the CTBT. And he personally says he's not concerned. On the other hand, he also said that he would hold Russia to the commitments made to him by the Russian Foreign Ministry on continuing support for the CTBT, no intention of testing unless another country tests, and to complete the international monitoring stations, and also to continue supplying data from the 30 stations to the International Data Center at the CTBTO here in Vienna. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Tariq, for your very constructive information provided. I also would like to point that Dr. Rauf joined our debates after holding his own seminar on the TPNW, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. So many thanks for taking the time, for finding the time in your schedule to join our debates. So, as I promised to hold a Q&A session, let's turn to it. And I will ask all our debaters, all our participants, to raise their virtual hands in order to indicate the desire to address the questions to our invited experts. And please specify which expert in particular you would like to pose your question to. So who will be the first? Okay, Pavel, please.
Yes, thank you so much. If I may, I would like to ask a question to Professor Nopf in regards to what he said about protest and advocacy campaigns. Do you think that if the push comes to the shove in the current political situation, United States would be able to convince the public of the necessity of conducting nuclear tests? Thank you.
Thank you, Pavel. That's a really good question. And I wish I knew the answer. I don't actually know the answer. At the moment, issues related to nuclear weapons are not very high on the agenda for the U.S. public in terms of issues they care about a lot. So I think that probably leaves whoever is the U.S. president a fair amount of freedom of action to do what they want without necessarily attracting a whole lot of public attention. It's possible that would change. The public has historically been sensitive to actions that they see as raising the danger of nuclear war. And there's even a little bit of a pattern of viewing presidents of different parties differently. So a Democratic president tends to get more pressure from the conservative side if they're seen as being too dovish or negotiating too generous a treaty with a potential adversary. They get criticism. Republican presidents are more likely to arouse opposition from the liberal side. So if after the 2024 election in the United States, we move back to a Republican administration and they make a move to resume nuclear testing, I think there would be some level of protest against that and criticism, but whether it would be sufficiently large to stop them, that's hard to say, but I'm not super optimistic about that. I think there would be some activism, but it wouldn't be giant.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Grace, please, your questions.
Thank you. I do have a question. I very much appreciate the views and expert opinions that have been presented to us. Thank you all. And my question, I believe, is for Dr. Ralph, but I'm not sure if anybody else would like to weigh in. I'm always concerned about how the U.S. and Russia can get together diplomatically to solve non-proliferation issues. And I read in 2 of Dr. Potter's books here from CNS that he feels like our best chance at cooperating is technically, on purely technical matters. We have a history and we have the potential of cooperating together. And he also says that a lot of times cooperation between Russian and U.S. scientists has led to political cooperation as well and diplomatic cooperation for non-proliferation. And I'm wondering if you have any opinions about that, if you share those hopes, or if you feel negative, and anything that you would like to say on the matter. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. So that's a very insightful question. Traditionally, the Soviet Union and the United States were on the same page in terms of preventing nuclear proliferation. And the drafts of the NPT were drafts prepared by the 2 states. So I would say that until 2018, despite a worsening relationship between Moscow and Washington, at least in the non-proliferation treaty fora, the 2 sides cooperated with each other and refrained from unnecessary criticism other than the token points that they would make in an opening statement. But starting in 2018, for the first time, they were at loggerheads publicly. And that situation, unfortunately, has now deteriorated to personal animosity. In the past, you could disagree with the policies of a particular state or the statements of its president or foreign minister, but you would then go have a coffee afterwards. And that situation started disappearing in 2018, and after February 22, it's become completely worse. Nobody wants to be seen talking to a Russian diplomat. When I was attending the NPT PrepCom, I was sitting in the seat of a country that was not present, and somebody from the Russian delegation came over to ask me a question, and I replied to that question, and afterwards a couple of delegates from other countries said, "You were talking to the Russians." I said, "Yeah, of course I'm talking to the Russians. They are in the room. They are party to the NPT, and you should be talking to them as well." So this is the most unfortunate thing is it is now getting into personal insults and animosity towards each other personally, and that makes it very difficult. But I think this still is also affecting at the scientific level. You at Monterey have Dr. Siegfried Hecker there as a distinguished eminent scientist. He was a director of the Los Alamos Laboratory, and he led a number of joint scientific discussions with his Russian counterparts. And in the past, the academies of science, the Russian Academy of Science, and before that, the Soviet Academy of Science and its equivalent, the National Academy of Science, would do joint studies and joint projects. And those two, unfortunately, have also stopped. So in the current context, I don't see an opportunity either at the diplomatic level or at the scientific level in the short term for there to be re-engagement. And I think this is why this type of a non-governmental event is very important to keep the dialogue open. And my last comment is that last year, when I did wanted to do a couple of webinars, I couldn't get somebody from the US to come if there was a Russian on the panel. And then a few months later, I was successful in getting Alexei Arbatov, and then on the US side, Rose Gottemuller. So that showed that there was a change on the US side, that even if you are not a serving government person, you are at least willing to come to a track 2 type event and talk in a very civil manner about positions. And although they didn't agree, they managed to, we had a productive discussion.
Thank you so much. Veronica, please go ahead.
Well, I have a question for Vladimir Petrovich Kuchinov, and it mostly concerns supercomputers and supercalculators, so the work of physicists. And, well, does Russia possess any kind of supercomputers that would be able to, replicate this nuclear fusion and forecast the ramifications of nuclear blasts? Well, as we have heard, French and American scientists failed to do so, or at least now. So, what about Russia? The information is not in the web on this matter. So,
thank you for your questions, and it's definitely information not in the web, because it's rather sensitive information. What I just can say that indeed our labs also have a very good supercomputers, which make be as an instrument for modeling of nuclear, let's say, reaction, I should say, neither, or fission or fusion, and definitely some, let's say, computer, I should say, modeling is going on. But I'm not specialist in this area, so I just using the same open source information as any other people. And what I read, it's just only some kind of information that our labs do have supercomputers.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Spencer, please.
Thank you, Elena. And my question is also for you, Vladimir Petrovich. I was just curious if you think today that the current IAEA safeguard system if there's anything that can be done to improve it, or if any such improvements would be politically possible right now, or do you think that the current safeguard system with the additional protocol is satisfactory to avoid proliferation?
Okay, my personal view, certainly, yeah. I believe that EIA safeguard system, we are talking about the safeguard system, let's say, related to the NPT. And let's say, Russian specialists always, let's say, said, and we also support some such wording in the final, let's say, NPT review conference, that comprehensive safeguards agreement and additional protocol, there is some kind of good gold standards for performing by the EIA their safeguard system. So at least from my perspective, or from my understanding, from my vision, current, let's say, safeguards system as a whole, as well as let's say its verification part, in a good stand. So all this, let's say, discussion about innovation, we always should ask a question: innovation for what? Because innovation either to save money, to make more efficient application of safeguards, or let's say more effective safeguards. But it's, in other words, making safeguards more effective, you just could perform better job for the same money. So this is, we always should think about this. But personally, today I'm convinced that safeguards system based on comprehensive safeguards agreement and additional protocol, this is today is the best tool for the agency to perform safeguards.
Elena, can I come in on that?
Yes, please, Tariq, Jeffrey, if you would like to add something, go ahead.
So, yeah, I would like to note that Vladimir Kuchinov was part of a joint study carried out by the Nuclear Threat Initiative and your sister organization in Moscow, CNES, led by Khlopkov, which you can find on the web. I think there's a Russian version and an English version where experts from both countries came together to talk about safeguards, because for a time there were some differences at the IAEA on safeguards. I am concerned, the focus of the Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement, IMCIRC 153, is on nuclear material, which is pursuant to Article 3.1 of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And my concern is that in the current way the Safeguards Department is working, I'm not sure whether the focus on nuclear material remains at the same level. They are more interested now in open source information and satellite imagery and big data. They have bought the Palantir program. Palantir was a program made by Peter Thiel for the U.S. intelligence agencies. So they are more engaged in more of these esoterics. And we need better confidence that the focus still remains on nuclear material. And I am very concerned that these new issue of naval nuclear propulsion, both by Brazil, and the Brazil is an indigenous program using a low enriched uranium, but Australian submarines, Australia would either get them from the UK or from the US. They will use 93.7% highly enriched uranium, up to 200 plus kilograms per submarine. Over 8 submarines, you have more than 2 tons of direct weapon usable material completely outside of safeguards. And I've been writing about this, and you can Google it. And the DG and others are not very happy with my complaints. But 2 years have gone by since AUKUS was announced, September 2021, and even till today, we do not have even a draft of a safeguards concept or a safeguards approach. for verification of non-prescribed military use and how to implement Article 14 of IMCIRC 153. And incidentally, you'll find a couple of articles on that also in the Non-Proliferation Review going back many years.
Okay, thank you. Jeffrey?
Just, may I react a little bit?
Yes, please. Okay.
Okay, Tarek, I certainly, maybe you are more deeply, let's say, involved in secretariat discussion, and definitely maybe you know better what is going on in the secretariat. But at least how I interpret this state-level approach and the verification accent in the current safeguard system, I should say that I rely on their statement, secretariat statement, that basis for this system is still nuclear accountancy and control. So for me, it means that base is still, let's say, or accent made on nuclear material. And provide me, let's say, belief and the assurance that the Secretariat is really verifying not only this from open source information, non-declared activity, but also actual declared material as well. But okay, as far as let's say your concern about interpretation of Article 14, you are not alone. There are a lot of experts which have concern, but definitely this is how to interpret what is written there, what is written in PT itself. You see, and certainly agency is not, let's say, in position, and at least from my perspective, not in the position and not allowed, let's say, legally allowed, to verify nuclear material in submarine, in military, in actual military use. So what agency can do, it's only when this nuclear material either let's say, loaded in submarine or unloaded after some, let's say, action. So this is certainly issue, and certainly it requires discussions, and it's what was, let's say, discussed previously. Certainly it would be very nice to discuss this with our US colleague as well. Thank you.
Yeah, so Vladimir, I claim that I was the first person to write about this way back in 1988 when Canada wanted to get nuclear-powered submarines. But, you know, in Article 14, the state has to provide the isotopic composition and quantity of nuclear material. Yeah, I know, I just want to do it for the benefit of the participants.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm done. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Jeffrey, would you like to add any comments?
I think Tarek and Vladimir are so much more familiar with the fine details of safeguards than I am that I will probably not try to add anything on this one.
Okay, so it's time to turn to our next part, to mentors' remarks. And I'm pleased to give the floor to Ms. Sarah Erickson, the graduate of the International Dual Degree MA Program Global Security, Nuclear Policy, and VMD Non-Proliferation, who is currently working in UNIDIR as a research assistant. Sarah took part in the debates several times in different roles as a debater, as a timekeeper, and now as a mentor. So, Sarah, please. Nice to see you again.
It's great to see everyone again. And I just want to give my big congratulations to all of the teams for your work. It was fantastic to be able to hear all the points made. Some of them, as we're saying, more of the traditional, and maybe some unorthodox positions as well that were presented. I want to give the shout out to the affirmative teams as well for rising up to that challenge. There was so much diligent, background research by all teams that was shown. And because you guys provided such a good kind of compelling arguments, I did just want to raise in a little points that although CTBT is not entered into force yet, for now we do have UN Security Council resolutions that are relevant to the conversation as well. And I'm thinking of 1887 resolutions. So there are still some legally binding frameworks to consider when talking about nuclear test resumptions. So just wanted to point that out because some of the conversations were so compelling. But in that spirit, I do think that the comprehensive manner in which everybody did argue their perspective, points, whether it be the economic, social, geopolitical context, all of these points and the comprehensive manner, I think that the students, once you transition from students into practitioners, into then future negotiators, will be really important to take with you as you hopefully, strengthen the NPT, which is the goal that we're all after. And I think practicing these debates, this academic exercise from both perspectives is extremely useful. And I hope that everyone took lessons from it. But I just thoroughly enjoyed being able to hear the points presented, how well you articulated, stayed in, calm considerations, had all of your points ready. So loved hearing the debates. Hope to continue being invited because it's fantastic to hear how you guys always manage to do these, to tackle these points and really, provocative. I mean, ПИР-Центр does a fantastic job with provocative questions, but if you're not on the cutting front edge of the real crises that are happening today, then you're not going to reach any solutions. So I think this is exactly why the exercise is needed most, even, if it does ruffle some feathers on the, outside facing. So congratulations to all the teams. It was great to be able to listen.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And now I'm happy to give the floor to Dr. Ekaterina Mikhailenko, Associate Professor at the Ural Federal University. Ekaterina, please.
Thank you, Elena. It was a great pleasure for me to participate in this event. Thank you, Vladimir Orlov. Thank you, Elena. Thank you, honorable experts. And I would like to say that there was a really interesting simulation or part when people are preparing very different positions. From my point, it was very difficult to be, affirmative team. I don't know how people can collect all these very valid arguments. And for me, it's very interesting. And I think it's very good when great that we can hear the position of the real experts. I think now all participants of these teams, they can compare their arguments with the positions of the experts. And I think it's really good. It's really good in order to understand what was really good or maybe what should be done better maybe later. So thank you very much for this participation. I think it's a great experience for all students, for all people here who are sitting here, because and I don't know how people from other countries, but I think for Russian students it was also not easy to participate, to have the real discussion in English because it's not native language. So I think that it was good. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for these debates.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mikhailenko. It always pleasure for ПИР-Центр to have you among the participants of our events. And many thanks for participating in the debates again. It's not the first time Ekaterina has been engaged in these activities, and we are pleased to see such wonderful results regarding her mentorship. So I'm pleased to turn to Ms. Alexandra Zubenko, who is currently the student of the 7th cohort of the International Dual Degree MA program in non-proliferation studies. But Alexandra is a mentor this time, not accidentally. Previously, she participated in the debates as a debater. She was a ПИР-Центр research fellow, developing many projects in the realm of the nuclear non-proliferation and arms control. She participated in the 10th NPT Review Conference, and currently Alexandra is continues to develop her professional career at the MGIMO of the Russian Academy of Sciences. So, Alexandra, please go ahead.
Thank you, Elena. I would like to join the words said by all the mentors. I really enjoyed this wonderful intellectual exercise, which we all followed with great excitement. I think the Q&A session was really thought-provocative, and you all showed very well how contradictory the topic is. And I would like to pay special regards to my team because they, worked really well, and I know that they were nervous, probably that we had some disputes on the structure, but they all showed well, and I'm really proud of them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. And unfortunately, today we do not have among us Mr. Anatoly Shokin, consultant of education and training program of ПИР-Центр, who helped to prepare for debates the students of our dual degree MA program in non-proliferation studies, in particularly Linus Heller and Grace Smith. Anatoly, unfortunately, faced some problems with his health, so it was impossible for him to take part in the debates at this time. But as I know, he already conveyed his congratulations to his own team. And as far as I know, it was a very lovely experience both for him and for his debating team to prepare for the debates. So, and now it's time to turn to Dr. Vladimir Orlov, who listened to us all for so long, and now we will be happy to listen to him. Vladimir Andreevich, please go ahead.
Thank you. Again, thank you for your great job. I think it was really a result of hardworking exercise, your homework. You did, all of you, really well. Now, I did not want to intervene much. There are not all my students here on the screen, but there are many of my students here on the screen, and they see me and listen to me every Tuesday. So in that sense, it was good for me probably more to listen to the group rather than to comment. I'm also very grateful to all our partners here in this series of Timerbaev debates, to the Middlebury Institute, of course, our good friends, to MGIMO University, and to Urals Federal University. There is MGIMO Non-Proliferation Mafia, there is Yekaterinburg Non-Proliferation Mafia, there is Monterey Non-Proliferation Mafia. So all the mafias unite. I think that's important, particularly important today. Some of you, I think, raised that issue when there is a lot of debating going here and there, but there is not as much debating which is positive, which is international, and which is held in the partnership spirit. This is what we lack. And hopefully today we didn't lack it at all. Today we had a very useful, very collaborative exercise. I'm very grateful to our experts, and it's really good to see you all here, and just you provided invaluable contributions for the students in a very limited time, so in a very professional manner. So thank you very much, Tariq. Thank you very much, Vladimir Petrovich, and thanks to all, and to Jeff who left. So thanks to all who contributed to that. Well, the topic is very interesting. We can continue on that. Actually, we will not, because we have 5 minutes left, no more than that. I have to admit that ПИР-Центр was very much consumed very practically with this issue in last months. I think starting June, Elena may correct me, but she remembers our discussions with our American colleagues on this issue as early as June this year. Somewhere in Switzerland, and then this issue, of course, became much more public. Just yesterday, talking to a senior diplomat from a very Western and very non-nuclear weapons state, I heard a very interesting interpretation of the outcome of the Russian decision to de-ratify. She said, that was good, because that would turn more attention to the CTBT and would probably help at some point a trilateral ratification simultaneously by Russia, United States, and China. I'm not sure I'm so optimistic. I definitely would not send you that optimistic message. I have strong reasons to be much more skeptical about the future of CTBT per se, but the discussion we had today clearly was extremely helpful. And I'm very grateful to Elena Karnaukhova, who managed to orchestrate this debate exactly in a very ПИР-Центр style manner. Open, sincere, and professional. The only thing I would like to add to that, that for my group, for my students, there will be a class next Tuesday, normally at 5:30 p.m. Moscow time. And by the way, there are not only Russians and Americans present here, but also we have an Austrian colleague, a Brazilian colleague. So it's much more diverse in the sense of nuclear weapon, non-nuclear weapon, and in other senses as well, which I appreciate. And I will share with my group a little bit of my comments on your performance. For all participants, I would like to announce that the 8th Timerbaev debates will take place in Zvenigorod in June next year, during the first week of June. And we do not know the topic yet, but we are sure the life now is so generous in producing us topics for debates. We will not have shortage of topics by that time. We will have our next debates on the margins of our 23rd International Summer School on International Security, on Global Security, and of course, those who want to participate and have not had an opportunity yet at that school as participants, you will get information about that early next year, how you can apply and how you can try. We will have it in the same place as Zvenigorod, where in the mid-1940s, soon after 1945, a team of Soviet engineers, nuclear physicists, was selected by Mr. Beria and was trained in Savino-Storozhevsky Monastery for the first Soviet nuclear test. And just from Zvenigorod was sent by train to Semipalatinsk to practically prepare the first Soviet nuclear test. So the life is full of paradoxes. An ancient, peaceful, church-filled city, town was also the place related to the nuclear tests history. Thank you very much, all of you, for your active participation. I'm very glad to see you all. I'm very glad we all did it so well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. I also would like to add some brief comments as a conclusions. I think that it was a right choice to devote the seventh debates, the seventh Timerbaev debates to this topic, because it led us all to understand better all the aspects of the issues which we consider today. And when we briefed our debaters and mentors, we do really ask them to analyze the wide range of the political, military, technical, scientific, social, economic, ecological, geopolitical, and other aspects of the agenda. And we also ask them not to represent the point of view of any nuclear weapon or non-nuclear weapon states. I think that it was a very good logic of behavior, because it is very important to the specialist in international relations to be, first of all, an analyst, to be objective, impartial, unemotional, and critical. Of course, our agenda today has a kind of moral aspects, many moral aspects, but we should be prepared to different scenarios and in order to keep our planet safe and sound. I hope that our intellectual exercises which we made today will help us to preserve the peace in the world. And with these words, just let me announce the end of the 7th International Timerbaev Nuclear Debates. As it was mentioned, ПИР-Центр conducted a research on the role of Звенигород in the developing of the Soviet nuclear testing program. I will send you the link to this article. It was published in our website, but unfortunately only in Russian. I think that some of you can read it even in Russian, and the majority, or maybe even all of the participants, can use Google to translate different words if needed. And also, I would like to remind you that Ambassador Timerbaev, whom we commemorated today, prepared a very big research, prepared a monograph on the comprehensive ban on nuclear testing. Unfortunately, it was prepared only in Russian, but this year ПИР-Центр digitalized this book and published it again at our website. I'm happy to send the link to this book as well to our chat. Please save it. And if you face some problems with access to our educational and training platform, Non-Proliferation World, my colleague Ksenia Mineva will be happy to help to all of you. So may I thank you once again, debaters, mentors, our experts, and of course my colleagues Dr. Vladimir Orlov and Ksenia Mineva for holding and for preparing this event. I think it was very successful. Many thanks to you all.